You are a Union corporal in the trenches at Petersburg, Virginia in November 1864, and a federal inspector arrives in 72 hours to investigate what the newspapers are calling treason, and what you call the only reason 300 men are still alive. Not because the truces were the problem, because keeping them secret was impossible once replacements started writing letters home describing what they did not understand. Here's what 72 hours actually cost when everything you built to keep men alive becomes evidence for a court-martial. If sleep stories built on impossible choices help you drift off, hit subscribe and we'll keep building them. You're sitting in the forward picket post east of Cemetery Hill when Sergeant Elias Holt arrives with the memorandum, 3 hours before dawn. November 14, 1864. The cold comes in through the gaps in the duckboards. Your breath shows white in the darkness. Coffee is brewing somewhere behind you in the bomb-proof shelters. You can smell it mixing with wood smoke from the warming fires. Across no man's land, maybe 200 yards out, Confederate camp sounds drift through air so still it carries every cough, every murmured conversation, every scrape of metal on metal. The envelope in Holt's hand is sealed, official. He sets it on the ammunition crate beside you without comment. Petersburg headquarters dispatch, he says. Came through at midnight. You don't open it immediately. Holt wouldn't be here at 3 in the morning for routine correspondence. What's in it? Major General Edward Ferrero, inspection tour, arrives November 17 at 0300 hours. Holt's voice is flat. Former schoolteacher from Massachusetts. 12 years managing classroom discipline before the war. He builds trading schedules now with the same precision he once used for multiplication tables. Forward picket inspection scheduled for dawn same day. The name stops you. Ferrero commanded the USCT division at the crater in July, 4th wave into the pit. His men were blamed when the newspapers needed someone responsible for 500 dead in 4 hours. You break the seal, read by lamplight. The memorandum uses the phrase, aggressive vigilance, 3 times. It references a Harper's Weekly article from October describing, quote, fraternization and organized collaboration across Grant's siege lines. It states that General Ferrero has been tasked by the War Department to conduct personal inspections of trench discipline and interview enlisted men directly regarding, quote, any irregular arrangements or communications with enemy forces. A staff captain accompanies him. No other assignment listed except documentation of evidence for courts-martial proceedings. The waterproof package crossed the line last night. Tobacco south, coffee north, same as every 3rd night since June. Our Beaumont's note was wrapped inside the oilcloth. 3 sentences about his regiment's tobacco supply running low, and a warning that his own officers were asking questions about the quiet sectors. You've been maintaining this system for 5 months. The artillery fires on schedule. Confederate guns at 900 hours. Union response at 1400 hours. Both sides elevated enough to clear the trenches and land in empty ground 200 yards back. Nobody dies. The latrine runs happen during agreed windows. Water details move without drawing fire. The daily attrition rate dropped from 12 men per week to near 0 by August. Ferrero was at the crater, you say. His division went in 4th, Holt confirms. United States colored troops got blamed for the failure when Burnside needed someone to throw to the newspapers. The Battle of the Crater was 4 months ago, a disaster that killed 500 men in 4 hours when a mine shaft collapsed and turned an assault into a massacre. Ferrero's division was held in reserve, then sent forward into a pit already filled with Confederate fire and Union dead. The newspapers said his troops broke under pressure. The soldiers who were there said they were sent into a death trap with no support and no retreat. So he's here to rebuild his reputation, you say. He's here to find exactly what we've built. Because proving that Grant's siege lines are compromised by fraternization is the kind of investigation that gets reported in Washington. It rehabilitates a career. Holt shifts his weight. The duckboards creak. He cannot be reasoned with. He cannot be corrupted. His career depends on finding what you have spent 5 months building. You look at the memorandum again. Ferrero arrives with a staff captain whose only assignment is documenting evidence for courts-martial. 72 hours, you say. 69 now? Private Donovan is sleeping in the shelter behind you, 20 years old. Arrived from a Philadelphia recruitment depot 2 weeks ago, carrying a newspaper clipping about Petersburg that described the siege in terms of glory and imminent victory. He watches everything. Writes letters home every 3 days. Yesterday he asked you why the Confederate artillery fires at the same time every morning, and why nobody takes cover anymore. You didn't answer. You told him to ask Holt about ammunition distribution schedules. Donovan's letters are already in the mail system, Holt says. Nothing we can do about those. Question is what he writes in the next 69 hours, and whether Ferrero's captain interviews him. The lamplight throws shadows across the trench wall. Somewhere behind the lines, a horse stamps. The coffee smell is stronger now. In 40 minutes the sky will start to lightening. In 5 hours, the Confederate artillery will fire on schedule. In 69 hours, a general who needs to prove something will arrive to inspect a system that has kept 300 men alive by operating in the space between orders and survival. Ferrero will inspect the forward pickets personally. The memorandum specifies that he will question enlisted men directly. He will walk these trenches at dawn on the 17th, looking for exactly the kind of evidence that Donovan has been watching form for 14 days. How much does Colonel Thomas Hartwell know, you ask? Officially, nothing. Holt's voice doesn't change. Practically, he signs the duty rosters. He sees the casualty reports. He's aware that this sector has remained quiet while positions 2 miles south are losing 4 men a week to sharpshooter fire. That's not the same as knowing about the packages. No, Holt agrees, it's not. You fold the memorandum and put it in your coat pocket. The paper crinkles. The sound is too loud in the pre-dawn silence. What survives the inspection, you ask? Holt doesn't answer immediately. He's looking out toward the Confederate lines. Nothing visible yet. Just darkness, and the distant glow of their warming fires. That's not a sergeant's decision, he says finally. I maintain schedules, I coordinate details, I don't make policy about what gets buried and what gets defended. Which means it's your decision. You're the corporal manning the forward picket. You're the one who receives Beaumont's notes and decides what to do with them. You're the one who has to choose what Ferrero sees, and what he doesn't. The coffee smell is very strong now. Behind you, someone is moving in the shelter. Donovan, probably, waking for the morning watch rotation. 72 hours to decide whether the system that has kept men alive is treason or necessity, whether the evidence gets destroyed or defended. Whether 300 Union soldiers and an unknown number of Confederate soldiers survive Ferrero's inspection the same way they survived 5 months of siege. By depending on arrangements their commanders cannot acknowledge, and their government would call collaboration. The cold is deeper now. The stars are still out. Across no man's land, the Confederate camp is quiet. You have 69 hours. Dawn comes with the artillery schedule intact. The Confederate guns fire at 900 hours exactly. Elevated trajectory. The shells land 200 yards behind your position in ground that was cleared of equipment last week. Everybody stays below the trench line. Nobody dies. Ferrero arrives in 66 hours. The thought sits in your chest while you watch the shell impacts. Donovan watches from the firing step with the expression of someone trying to reconcile what he's seeing with what he was told. He's been here 14 days. Long enough to notice patterns, not long enough to understand what they mean. They're aiming long, he says. Ammunition expenditure requirements, you tell him. Both sides have to maintain firing schedules for headquarters reports. It's not a lie. It's an accurate description of a different system than the one he's observing. The firing schedules are real. The headquarters reports are real. The fact that both sides have coordinated their ammunition expenditure to achieve maximum report compliance with minimum casualties is the part that doesn't appear in official documentation. Private Donovan is the 1864 equivalent of someone who just started watching a TV series in season 5 and keeps asking why nobody's explaining the character relationships. Everybody else has been here since June. The learning curve was 5 months of daily survival lessons. Donovan has his newspaper clipping and 14 days of observation that don't match what the clipping describes. How long have they been firing at the same time every day, he asks. Since August. Don't we adjust our positions based on enemy fire patterns? We adjust our positions based on tactical necessity, you say. When tactical necessity requires adjustment, we adjust. Donovan thinks about this. He's not stupid. He's trying to fit the pieces together in a way that makes sense within the framework he brought from Philadelphia. The framework that will matter in 66 hours, when Ferrero's staff captain starts interviewing enlisted men. The Union response fires at 1400 hours. Same elevated trajectory. Same empty ground. The Confederate positions stay quiet. Your positions stay quiet. The day's ammunition expenditure requirement is satisfied for both sides. Nobody dies. Sergeant Holt appears at 1500 hours with the duty rosters. He doesn't mention the memorandum. He doesn't mention Ferrero. He moves through the routine with the precision of someone who has concluded that maintaining routine is the only viable response to situations that have no procedural solution. Latrine detail at 1700, he says, water detail at 1900, package detail at 2200. The package detail isn't written on the roster, it never is. Holt speaks in 2 registers simultaneously. The official schedule that gets recorded, and the operational schedule that keeps the system functioning. In 66 hours, Ferrero's captain will compare these rosters to what enlisted men describe. The gap between the 2 registers is evidence. Beaumont's rotation, you ask? Confirmed last cycle. They'll signal at 21:45. Donovan is close enough to hear. He doesn't ask questions. He's learning that lesson at least. The things that aren't explained are the things you're not supposed to ask about directly. But he's also learning to recognize patterns. Learning what questions to ask himself. Learning what to put in letters home that are already in the mail system heading toward Philadelphia, where they might or might not be forwarded to Harper's Weekly or the War Department. Colonel Thomas Hartwell arrives at 1600 hours for what the Daily Log will call a routine inspection of forward positions. He's 53, career officer. Commands the regiment from a headquarters position 300 yards back. He walks the trench line with the posture of someone who expects every word he speaks to be quoted in after-action reports. Corporal, he says. Status. Sector quiet, sir. No casualties. Artillery exchange completed per schedule. Enemy activity? Standard defensive posture. No unusual movements. Hartwell looks out across no man's land. The sun is lower now. Long shadows. The temperature is dropping. In 3 hours it'll be cold enough to see your breath again. In 63 hours, Ferrero will stand in this exact position asking these exact questions, with a staff captain recording every answer. General Ferrero arrives November 17th to inspect forward picket discipline, Hartwell says. His voice is precisely neutral, official. His inspection will include interviews with enlisted personnel regarding adherence to standing orders concerning enemy contact and communication protocols. Understood, sir. Standing orders specify that any communication with enemy forces must be reported immediately through chain of command. Any arrangement, agreement, or exchange of goods with enemy forces is prohibited under Article of War 57. He's still looking at no man's land. Not at you. These orders have been in effect since June 15, 1864. Yes, sir. The inspection will determine compliance with these orders. Hartwell turns now. Looks at you directly. His expression reveals nothing. I expect this sector to demonstrate the highest standards of discipline and adherence to regulations. Yes, sir. Any evidence of irregular arrangements would reflect poorly on the entire regiment. Any such evidence discovered during inspection would require immediate investigation and potential courts-martial for those involved. He pauses. One beat. Do you understand the situation, Corporal? Yes, sir. What he's saying officially, maintain regulations. What he's saying practically, whatever exists, Ferrero cannot find it. What he's not saying, I have seen the casualty reports. I know this sector has remained quiet. I am giving you 65 hours to solve a problem I cannot officially acknowledge exists. Hartwell leaves. The trench returns to routine. Donovan watches from the firing step. Holt manages the duty rotations. The sun continues dropping. The cold increases. At 21:45, the signal comes from the Confederate position. 3 quick flashes. Lamplight behind a shutter. The agreed sequence. Package detail, Holt says quietly. You move forward to the advanced position, 50 yards ahead of the main trench line. The ground here is torn up from 5 months of shelling. Craters. Debris. Dead ground where neither side maintains permanent positions. The exchange point is a collapsed section of log breastwork halfway between the lines. Beaumont's package is already there. You can see it in the starlight. Wrapped in waterproof oilcloth. The same system you've been using since June. The same system that will be evidence in 61 hours, if it's still visible. You leave your package, coffee, wrapped the same way, and retrieve his. The exchange takes 40 seconds. No words, no contact. Just the package's changing position in darkness. Back in the trench, you open Beaumont's package. Tobacco, good quality, Virginia leaf. And a note written in pencil on paper that's been folded to palm size. Tram's inspection coming your side too. Captain Webb asking questions about quiet sectors. Some men already talked. Be careful what stays visible. R.B. You burn the note in the warming fire. The paper curls and blackens. The words disappear. The tobacco stays. In the morning it'll be distributed through the regular supply system as if it came through official channels. Which technically it did. Just not the channels that appear in the supply ledgers. Donovan is awake when you return to the shelter. He's writing a letter by lamplight. The paper is propped on his knee. His handwriting is careful, neat. The kind of penmanship that suggests someone who wants his words to be read clearly. You don't ask what he's writing, he doesn't offer to share. The letter will go into the mail system tomorrow. It'll reach Philadelphia in a week. Whatever it says will already be said. Nothing you can do about it now. And if Ferrero has people monitoring mail from Petersburg, if that's how Harper's Weekly got their information in the first place, then Donovan's observations are already intelligence. 61 hours remain. The lamp burns lower. You think about what Beaumont wrote. Some men already talked. On their side, officers are asking questions. On your side, a general is bringing a documentation specialist. The system is being squeezed from both ends. The question isn't whether it collapses. The question is whether you can control how it collapses. The morning of November 15th begins with the question of what Ferrero will physically see when he inspects the forward picket at dawn on the 17th. You're sitting in the bomb-proof shelter with the inventory of material evidence that currently exists in this sector. 58 hours until the general arrives. 58 hours until a man who needs to rehabilitate his reputation starts looking for exactly what you've built. Holt has the list. He's been maintaining it since midnight. Written in pencil on the back of a requisition form. Not official documentation, just accounting. 7 waterproof oilcloth packages in the supply dugout, he says. Confederate tobacco in 5 of them, Union coffee in 2. Beaumont's notes from the last 4 exchanges. You burned last night's. The previous 3 are in your coat pocket. You remove the notes. 3 pieces of folded paper. Pencil writing. Short messages about supply schedules and timing adjustments. Evidence of coordination. Evidence of communication with enemy forces. Evidence that would require a courts-martial under Article of War 57 if discovered during Ferrero's inspection. Artillery schedule coordination, Holt continues. No written documentation on our side, but the pattern is visible to anyone who observes for 2 consecutive days. Latrine and water detail timing. Same issue. No written record, but the pattern proves coordination. Ferrero will be here for 3 days. The memorandum specified that. 3 days walking 8 miles of siege line. Even if he only spends 6 hours in this sector, that's enough time to watch the artillery pattern repeat twice. Enough time to see the details move during agreed windows. Enough time to recognize what no written orders can hide. Can't bury a pattern, you say? No, but you can break it. 48 hours of random firing, random details, no predictability. By the time Ferrero arrives, there's nothing to observe except standard defensive operations. Which means abandoning the system. Which means casualties resume. Which means the quiet that has kept 300 men alive ends because an inspector needs proof of something to rehabilitate his reputation. What about Donovan's letters, you ask? Already gone. 3 letters in the last 14 days. Mail courier took them south yesterday. Holt's voice stays level. Content unknown. If he described what he's observed, Ferrero already has testimony before he arrives. The shelter is cold. The lamp throws shadows on the earthwork walls. Outside, the sky is brightening. The Confederate artillery will fire in 3 hours. The schedule holds. For now. For 55 more hours maybe. Beaumont's warning said Captain Webb is asking questions on their side, you say. Some men already talked. Means their system is compromised. Doesn't necessarily mean ours is. Unless Ferrero coordinates his inspection with Confederate command and compares evidence from both sides. Would he do that? Holt looks at you. Former schoolteacher. Man who spent 12 years managing children, who didn't want to learn multiplication. Expression perfectly neutral. He's trying to rebuild his reputation after the crater. He needs evidence that's conclusive enough to matter in Washington. Fraternization allegations without proof are just complaints. Fraternization allegations with coordinated evidence from both sides of the line are documentation of systematic collaboration. He pauses. Yes, he'd do that. The lamp flickers. Outside someone is moving. Morning watch rotation. The routine continues while you sit here counting evidence, counting hours, counting the men whose survival depends on what you decide in the next 55 hours. Options, you say. Holt unfolds the requisition form, turns it over, starts writing on a clean section. Option 1. Destroy all physical evidence. Break all patterns. Return to random operations for the next 60 hours. System ends. Casualties resume. Ferrero finds nothing but standard siege warfare. Option 2. Defend the system. Prepare documentation showing the arrangements as tactical necessity. Argue that reducing casualties while maintaining position is valid operational doctrine. Let Ferrero make the determination. That's not an option, that's a court-martial. Yes, Holt agrees. Probably is. Option 3? Holt stops writing, looks at the shelter wall, thinks. Hide the evidence well enough that Ferrero's inspection doesn't find it. Maintain the system carefully enough that observation over 48 hours doesn't prove coordination. count on the fact that he has 3 days to inspect 8 miles of siege line and probably won't focus on one sector long enough to see the pattern. That's not a plan. That's hoping we're lucky. Yes, Holt says. It is. The Confederate artillery fires at 900 hours, elevated trajectory, empty ground, the pattern holds. Donovan watches from the firing step. He's not writing this morning, just observing. His expression suggests someone who has concluded that asking direct questions produces answers that raise more questions. But observation produces its own answers. Observation over 14 days produces a Marby understanding that Ferrero's staff captain will recognize in 6 hours of interviews. You spend the afternoon moving packages. The 7 oilcloth bundles go from the supply dugout to a different location, a collapsed section of trench 80 yards south, where the November rains have created enough mud to bury material below casual inspection level. The tobacco gets redistributed into standard supply containers. The coffee stays. Coffee is coffee. Nothing proves it came from Confederate sources rather than Union commissary. Beaumont's notes go into the warming fire one at a time. The paper burns clean. The words disappear. The coordination they described continues to exist in the space between what's written and what's practiced, but Ferrero can't court-martial a space. At 1900 hours, Colonel Hartwell returns. No announcement. He just appears in the trench with the expression of someone conducting what the log will call a routine status check. Progress? He asks. Physical evidence secured, sir. Pattern adjustment beginning tomorrow. Pattern adjustment meaning? Random variation in artillery response timing. Random variation in detail schedules. Sufficient unpredictability to prevent observable coordination. Hartwell nods once. He's not asking what patterns existed before. He's not asking what evidence was secured where. He's asking whether the problem is being solved in a way that doesn't require him to officially know about it. He's asking whether his regiment will survive Ferrero's inspection without courts-martial proceedings that would destroy careers, including his own. General Ferrero is thorough, Hartwell says. His reputation depends on finding something. If there's nothing to find in this sector, he'll move to a different sector. He has 8 miles of line to inspect. Understood, sir. Ensure your men understand the regulations regarding enemy communication. Ensure they're prepared to answer questions accurately. He pauses. Ensure Private Donovan understands that describing observations is not the same as understanding what's being observed. Yes, sir. Hartwell leaves. The evening continues. The cold increases. At 2200 hours, the package exchange doesn't happen. No signal from the Confederate position. No movement toward the exchange point. The system pauses. Either Beaumont received his own warning and pulled back, or their side has already been compromised enough that continuing is impossible. The silence from across no man's land feels heavier than the routine ever did. You sit in the shelter at midnight with the inventory of what remains. 300 men who have survived 5 months of siege because the system worked. 49 hours until Ferrero arrives. No physical evidence except patterns that might or might not be visible to an inspector who needs them to be visible. Donovan's letters already in the mail system saying something you can't control. Beaumont's warning that his side is compromised. The question isn't what you've built. The question is what survives. 49 hours now. The lamp burns lower. Outside, the watch changes. Someone coughs. Wood smoke drifts through cold air. The stars are out. Across no man's land, the Confederate positions hold their silence. The exchange point is empty. The system is paused. Maybe permanently. You close your eyes, count hours, count evidence. Count casualties that haven't happened because of arrangements that officially don't exist and might not exist by dawn on November 17th. 49 hours until Major General Edward Ferrero arrives at Petersburg headquarters to inspect trench discipline and interview enlisted men about fraternization that the newspapers are calling treason, and you call the only reason 300 men are still alive. The shelter is very cold now. The lamp throws long shadows. You don't sleep, you count. The waterproof package sits in your coat pocket. You've checked the seal twice since midnight. It was intact then. Probably still is now. You're not opening it again. Sergeant Elias Holt stands beside you at the forward observation post, looking south across the frozen mud toward the Confederate earthworks. He's 41 years old, ran a schoolroom in Massachusetts for 12 years before the war, and speaks in questions that aren't questions. The package goes across tonight? Yes. Third night schedule? Yes. Beaumont expecting it? Should be. Holt nods once. He never asks why. He builds schedules the way he probably built lesson plans. Precise, sequential, no wasted motion. The trading system exists in his head as a series of intervals and confirmed deliveries. He doesn't frame it as collaboration. He frames it as maintaining operational predictability, which is a completely different thing that happens to look identical. The Confederate rifle pits are 60 yards south, close enough to hear conversations on windless nights. Far enough that a man running across would get shot by both sides before he made it halfway. Nobody runs. Instead, every third night, a package wrapped in oiled canvas gets left at the base of the shattered oak stump in no man's land. 20 minutes later, it's gone. 20 minutes after that, a different package appears in the same spot. This is the 1864 equivalent of a dead drop in a spy novel, except everybody knows about it, both sides depend on it, and the intelligence being exchanged is whether the artillery schedule will hold for another 48 hours, or whether someone's headquarters just ordered an assault that will get 300 men killed for 100 yards of frozen mud that looks exactly like the frozen mud they're already standing on. You've been running this system since June. 5 months. 0 unnecessary casualties on your section of the line during that period. The calculation is simple. Fighting produces corpses. Not fighting produces boredom and frostbite. And frostbite you can recover from. Donovan's been asking questions, Holt says. I know. About the packages specifically. I know that too. Private Donovan arrived from New York 2 weeks ago carrying a newspaper clipping about Petersburg fraternization and a very clear idea about what treason looks like. He's 19 years old, reads every general order twice, and has not yet learned that doctrine and survival sometimes require separate filing systems. He writes letters home, Holt adds. Yes. Long ones. You don't answer that. Holt's not asking a question. He's confirming you've noticed the same problem he has. The package in your pocket contains tobacco, 3 fishhooks, and a folded note in Beaumont's handwriting. You haven't read the note yet. You will, but not while standing next to Holt at the observation post where anyone could walk up. Ferrero arrives in 65 hours, Holt says. I'm aware. He'll inspect the forward pickets personally. Yes. Which means he'll be standing exactly where we're standing now, looking at exactly what we're looking at. You turn slightly. Holt's face shows nothing. He's looking at the oak stump in no man's land the way a school teacher looks at a student's incorrect answer on the blackboard. Not angry, just noting the error that will need correcting. The stump's been there since July, you say. Yes. Artillery hit. Yes. Nothing unusual about a stump. Nothing at all, Holt agrees. The problem isn't the stump. The problem is that the stump is in the exact center of no man's land, hasn't been touched by either side in 5 months despite being perfect cover for a forward position, and shows clear signs of repeated foot traffic in the mud around its base. Ferrero's not stupid, he's a political general, which is different. He doesn't understand trench warfare, but he understands evidence, and the stump is evidence. Could move the drop point, Holt says. Could. Would need to signal Beaumont. Yes. Tonight's package. You nod. The note you haven't read yet probably contains Beaumont's own warning about inspections on his side. The Confederates are having the same problem you are. Newspapers publishing stories about fraternization, headquarters demanding explanations, officers who've never spent a winter in siege lines making decisions about soldiers who have. Or, Holt says, we could make the stump look like what it should look like. Which is disputed ground, evidence of failed crossing attempts. Bloodstains optional but recommended. You consider this, stage the site, make it look like men died there trying to reach the other side. Which is technically true. Men would die there, if anyone was stupid enough to try crossing. You're just proposing to create the evidence without the actual corpses. Beaumont would need to cooperate, you say? Yes. We'd need to coordinate the staging. Yes. Which means another package, another signal. Another risk that Donovan sees something and writes it down in one of his long letters home that might arrive in New York the same week Harper's Weekly is running another story about Petersburg. Holt's quiet for a moment. Then, alternative is we stop the packages entirely. Let the system collapse now, before Ferrero arrives. No evidence because no activity. And the artillery schedule would become unpredictable again. Which means casualties. Which means the zero loss record you've maintained since June ends right before the inspection that's supposed to determine whether you've been maintaining combat readiness or undermining it. The wind picks up, your fingers are cold, the package in your pocket feels heavier than it should. I'll read Beaumont's note, you say, decide after that. Holt nods. He turns to leave, then stops. The inspection's in 65 hours, he says again. I know. Everything we've built has to either survive it or be gone before it starts. There's no middle option. I know that too. He walks back toward the main trench. You stay at the observation post, looking at the stump that's about to become either your salvation or your court-martial, depending on what you do in the next 48 hours. The Confederate earthworks are quiet. Too early for the morning stand to, another hour before the artillery schedule begins. You reach into your pocket. The seal on the package breaks clean. The note from R. Beaumont of Georgia is 4 lines written in pencil on the back of a requisition form. No date. No signature beyond the initial. Note: Min full inspector arrives our side 16th. Will question pickets directly. Stump visible from HQ position. Recommend cessation or relocation. You read it twice standing in the observation post, then once more after walking back to the dugout, where you keep the company records. Same words each time. 16 hours difference between his inspection and yours. The Confederates get their political general first. Which means Beaumont has 16 hours less than you do to make the ground between the lines look like something other than what it actually is. The dugout smells like wet earth and lamp oil. Private Collins is asleep in the corner, wrapped in a blanket that used to be gray, but is now the uniform color of everything underground. Something between mud and ash. He's 23 years old, can't read, and doesn't ask questions about packages because he doesn't know there are packages to ask about. You sit down at the packing crate that serves as a desk. The requisition form Beaumont used for his note is standard Confederate issue, which means he pulled it from his own company files. Wasting paper to send a warning. That tells you how serious he considers the problem. The stump in no man's land has been perfect for 5 months. Neutral ground, easy to find in darkness. Far enough from both trench lines that men approaching it look like they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. Watching the enemy. Now it's a liability. Evidence of coordination. Proof that the two sides have been communicating regularly enough to maintain a schedule. You could stop the drops entirely. Let the system go dark. No packages means no evidence. When Ferrero arrives in 65 hours and inspects the forward positions, he'll find trenches and rifle pits and nothing unusual. The stump becomes just another piece of artillery debris in the frozen mud. The arithmetic shifts immediately in your head. No packages means no intelligence about artillery schedules. No artillery intelligence means the morning bombardments become unpredictable again. Unpredictable bombardments means men standing in the wrong section of trench when the shells start falling. The zero casualty record you've maintained since June ends the day after you stop trading. You'll save 65 hours of operational security and spend it in casualties over the next month. The lamp flickers. Colin shifts in his sleep, but doesn't wake. Outside, you can hear the pre-dawn sounds of 300 Union soldiers preparing for another day of not dying if they can manage it. The alternative is relocation. Move the drop point to somewhere less visible. Somewhere Ferrero won't notice during his inspection, because he won't be looking in that direction. You pull out the folded map of the sector and spread it across the packing crate. The forward positions are marked in pencil, your trenches, the Confederate earthworks, the 60 yards of frozen mud between them. The stump is marked with a small X. You didn't put it there. Sergeant Holt did 3 months ago, after the system had been running long enough that it needed documentation. A single X in the exact center of no man's land. You trace the sight lines from the Union headquarters position. Ferrero will stand where Colonel Thomas Hartwell usually stands during inspections, the reinforced observation platform on the north side of the main trench, elevated 4 feet, to provide clear views of the forward positions. From that angle the stump is perfectly visible, dead center in his line of sight. You trace the sight lines from the Confederate headquarters, same problem. Beaumont's inspector will see exactly what Ferrero will see, just 16 hours earlier. There are 3 possible relocation points. Each has problems. The collapsed section of trench wall on the western edge of no man's land, too close to the Confederate rifle pits. A man approaching it from your side would draw immediate suspicion. The drainage ditch that runs north-south through the eastern section, too exposed, no cover. Anyone crossing to it would be visible for the entire approach. The shell crater 40 yards southwest of the current position, deep enough for concealment but directly in line with the Confederate artillery position. If they resume shelling that section, the crater becomes a death trap. You sit back. The lamp casts shadows across the map that make the pencil lines look deeper than they are. Collins wakes up. He blinks twice, sees you at the desk, and stays quiet. He's learned that officers working at packing crates before dawn usually don't want conversation. The temperature in the dugout is cold enough that you can see your breath. Your fingers are stiff. The requisition form with Beaumont's note sits beside the map. Recommend cessation or relocation. He's leaving the decision to you, which means he'll match whatever you choose. If you go dark, he goes dark. If you relocate, he'll find the new position and resume the schedule. 5 months of 0 unnecessary casualties balanced against 65 hours of inspection risk. You fold the map. The decision isn't actually complicated. It just feels that way because the stakes are uneven. Your career on one side, the lives of 300 Union soldiers on the other, and an unknown number of Confederate soldiers who've also stopped dying because nobody's ordered them to attack a position that everyone knows can't be taken. The system continues. You'll relocate, western edge, close to the Confederate pits, but far enough from headquarters sight lines that it won't appear on Ferrero's inspection route. Beaumont will have to coordinate his end, which means another package tonight, with the new location marked. One more risk before you eliminate the visible evidence. Collins sits up. Sir. Get Sergeant Holt, you say. Tell him the drop point moves tonight. Yes, sir. He pulls on his boots and leaves. The dugout returns to silence. You light a match and hold Beaumont's note over the lamp flame. The paper catches quickly. 4 lines of pencil on Confederate requisition, forms turning to ash in a Union dugout, while both armies sleep and wait for inspectors who don't understand that the mathematics of survival sometimes require cooperation between enemies. The flame reaches your fingers. You drop the burning paper into the tin cup you use for coffee. It curls black and stops moving. 64 hours now. Sergeant Holt arrives at the dugout 12 minutes after Collins delivers the message. He's carrying a rolled map under one arm and the expression of a man who's already calculated the same problems you spent the last hour working through. Western edge, he says. Not a question. Yes. 40 yards from their rifle pits. Yes. Visible from our trenches but not from headquarters. Correct. He unrolls his map on the packing crate. It's more detailed than yours. Individual rifle pits marked. Sight lines traced in red pencil. Approach routes drawn in blue. This is what a Massachusetts schoolteacher does with 5 months of siege warfare. He maps it like a lesson plan. Beaumont will need the exact position, Holt says. Can't rely on approximate landmarks at that distance. You nod. The new drop point is close enough to the Confederate lines that a 10-yard error puts the package in their trench instead of neutral ground. Beaumont needs coordinates he can pace out in darkness without using a light. Tonight's package includes a sketch, you say, measurements from the current stump position. He counts steps southwest, finds the collapsed trench wall, leaves his package in the gap between the timbers. And if he counts wrong, then we've left tobacco and fishhooks in the Confederate forward trench, and they'll either return it or smoke it. Either way, the system holds. Holt traces the new route on his map, blue pencil from your observation post to the western edge, longer approach, more exposure time. Yes. Who carries it? That's the operational question. The current system uses rotating carriers. Different man each drop. No pattern. Nobody making the walk often enough to establish a routine. But the new position requires someone who can pace exact distances in darkness without hesitation. Someone who's memorized the ground well enough to navigate by counting steps instead of landmarks. I'll take the first drop, you say, establish the route. After that we rotate. Holt looks at you for a long moment. Then, Ferrero's inspection is in 64 hours. I'm aware. If anything goes wrong tonight, if Donovan sees the approach, if the Confederates misunderstand the new position, if someone on either side decides the timing looks suspicious, you'll be walking directly into your own court-martial. Yes. Might be better to send Collins, or Patterson, someone expendable. You almost smile at that. Holt doesn't mean it the way it sounds. He means someone whose court-martial wouldn't unravel the entire system. Someone junior enough that their execution for treason would satisfy the newspapers without raising questions about who gave them orders. Collins can't count, you say. Patterson's been coughing for 3 days and sounds like an artillery barrage when he breathes. Neither of them can pace 40 yards in silence. Then you're carrying it yourself because nobody else is competent enough. That's usually why officers do anything. Holt rolls up his map. I'll prepare tonight's package. Sketch, measurements, and the tobacco Beaumont requested last week. You'll leave at 2200, same as the current schedule. I'll position 2 men at the observation post, to maintain the appearance of normal watch rotation. Donovan will be on the eastern perimeter. I've already adjusted the duty roster. You nod. Holt runs the schedules. He knows where every man stands during every watch. If he says Donovan will be 300 yards away looking in the wrong direction, then that's where Donovan will be. After tonight, Holt says, we have 64 hours before Ferrero arrives and 48 hours before Beaumont's inspector finishes questioning their pickets. If anything about the new position feels wrong, if Beaumont signals a problem, If the Confederates probe that section, we go dark immediately, no negotiation. Agreed. He turns to leave, then stops at the dugout entrance. The current stump position, you want it staged or left clean? You'd almost forgotten that part. The original drop point needs to look like what it should have been all along. Disputed ground. Evidence of crossing attempts. Blood optional but recommended. Leave it clean, you say. If we stage it and Ferrero finds one detail wrong, he starts looking for other manufactured evidence. Better to let it be exactly what it is. A stump in no man's land that both sides ignored, because neither side had reason to fight over it. And if he asks why there's foot traffic around the base, pickets checking for enemy movement, standard reconnaissance, we've been monitoring that position for 5 months, in case the Confederates decided to use it for cover during an assault. Holt considers this, which is technically true. All good lies are. He leaves. The dugout returns to silence. You sit at the packing crate and pull out a piece of paper. Not Confederate requisition forms this time, Union officers' writing paper, which you're supposed to use for official correspondence, and instead use for sketching drop point locations that will never appear in any official record. The collapsed trench wall on the western edge is approximately 6 feet long, constructed from logs that used to be part of the Confederate forward position before an artillery hit in July reduced them to structural debris. The gap between the timbers is 8 inches wide, large enough for a package, small enough that it's invisible unless you know exactly where to look. You draw the position from memory. The measurements Beaumont will need are simple. 42 paces southwest from the current stump, then 16 paces west, to the trench wall. The gap is on the north side, third timber from the eastern end. 42 and 16 and third timber north side. Beaumont can memorize that in 30 seconds. You fold the sketch and set it beside the lamp. Tonight's package will contain tobacco, fishhooks and a piece of paper that explains how 2 armies will continue not killing each other for at least another 48 hours. Outside, the pre-dawn sounds are louder now. 300 Union soldiers waking up to another day of siege warfare that looks like boredom and functions like survival. The lamp flickers again. You should probably trim the wick, but your fingers are too cold for precision work. Instead, you let it burn uneven and watch the shadows move across the dugout walls. 64 hours until Ferrero arrives. 48 hours until Beaumont's inspector finishes his questions. 2200 tonight for the first drop at the new position. The arithmetic is clear. You have exactly 1 chance to relocate the system before the inspections begin. If tonight's drop fails, there's no time to establish a backup position. The system goes dark, the artillery schedules become unpredictable, and the 0 casualty record ends. If tonight succeeds, you have 48 hours of operational security before anyone asks questions about the western edge. Collins returns. Sergeant Holt says the package will be ready at 21:30, sir. Good. Is there anything else? Yes. Get some sleep. You're on watch at the eastern perimeter starting 2100. He nods and returns to his corner. Within minutes he's asleep again, wrapped in his grey blanket, breathing steady. You stay at the packing crate. The sketch sits beside the lamp. The folded map shows the new position marked in pencil. 42 paces southwest, 16 paces west, third timber north side. You close your eyes and count the steps in your head. Muscle memory from 5 months of navigating no man's land in darkness. Your feet know the ground even when your eyes can't see it. The route feels solid, the position feels defensible, the timing feels possible. Everything feels like it will work right up until the moment it doesn't. 56 hours remain. The message arrives during the morning picket rotation. Captain Webb delivers it himself, which means it's official and cannot be ignored. The inspection schedule has changed. Ferrero arrives at Petersburg headquarters tomorrow night instead of the 17th. The forward picket inspection moves to dawn on the 16th. You've lost 24 hours. Webb stands in the dugout entrance, steam rising from his breath in the cold. General Grant's headquarters confirmed it an hour ago, he says. Ferrero's train reaches City Point at 1800 hours tomorrow. He'll be at division headquarters by midnight. The arithmetic is simple. You have until dawn the day after tomorrow to ensure that 300 men who depend on a system their commanding officers cannot officially acknowledge survive an inspection designed to discover exactly what you've spent 5 months building. Understood, you say. Webb nods once and leaves. Sergeant Holt arrives 14 minutes later. You show him the revised schedule without comment. 32 hours to the inspection, Holt says. Less if he decides to inspect tonight instead of waiting for dawn. He won't, you say. The orders specify dawn. Ferrero's the type who follows schedules. That's what we're counting on. That's part of what we're counting on. The trading schedule becomes irrelevant 32 hours early. The last package crossed 2 nights ago. The next exchange was planned for tonight. It won't happen now. Beaumont needs to know the timeline has compressed. But there's no way to signal across no man's land that doesn't involve movement Ferrero's advanced scouts might already be watching for. The stump marker sits in its new position. The drop point looks like disputed ground now. Close enough to both lines that neither side would risk crossing for a single piece of lumber. Perfect if you have time to establish the illusion through gradual neglect. You don't have time anymore. Options? Holt asks. You consider the map. 300 men. 63 separate evidence points that need to either disappear or transform into something that looks like coincidence rather than system. The waterproof packages are buried. Donovan's letters are your problem, not theirs. The artillery schedule is the only pattern that matters now. The Confederate guns fire at 900 hours exactly, you say. They fired at 900 hours for 5 months. If Ferrero's scouts are competent, they've already noticed. Can't change it now, Holt says. Any variation this close to inspection looks like we're trying to hide something. Which means the timing has to look like natural pattern instead of arranged schedule. How do you make 5 months of identical timing look natural? You pull out the record logs. Every artillery exchange since June, documented to the minute, because that's what keeps men alive, when the mathematics of survival depend on knowing exactly when to stay low and when to move. The pattern is too clean. That's the problem. Wars don't run on schedule. Chaos doesn't repeat with precision. The only way 5 months of 900-hour bombardments make sense is if both sides agreed to it. Or if one side is incompetent enough to be predictable. You start writing the new report. The Confederate artillery commander maintains inadequate operational security. His battery crews follow routine rather than tactical variation. Union forward observers have documented this pattern and exploited it for safe movement during predictable silence windows. It's not a lie, it's just incomplete. Holt reads over your shoulder. That works if Ferrero doesn't ask why we never reported it to division headquarters. We did report it, you say. 3rd week of July. Routine intelligence summary. Filed under observed enemy patterns. It's in the archives. Is it actually in the archives? It will be by tonight. Holt is quiet for a moment. Then he nods. The cold air feels thinner than it did an hour ago. The supply wagon arrives at 1400 hours with everything except coffee. Private Donovan inventories the delivery in the dugout's corner while you finish the revised intelligence summary. Hardtack, salt pork, ammunition, lamp oil, no coffee. The wagon master's manifest lists it as delayed due to requisition irregularities at City Point. Irregularities, Donovan says. That means some quartermaster sold it to a sutler. You don't look up from the paperwork. Probably. Men notice when the coffee runs out. They'll notice more if Ferrero finds what he's looking for. Donovan sets the last hardtack crate against the wall. The sound echoes flat in the narrow space. How long until the inspection? 41 hours. And we're telling them what exactly? Nothing, you say. The trading stopped 2 days ago. If any man here doesn't understand why, he hasn't been paying attention. The revised intelligence summary looks clean. 5 months of artillery pattern transformed into enemy incompetence, rather than mutual arrangement. The document will be backdated to July 22nd and inserted into division files before Ferrero's train reaches City Point. Colonel Thomas Hartwell, who commanded the forward observation posts in July before his transfer to Washington, will confirm the report's existence if asked. You sent him the request this morning through channels that don't appear in official correspondence logs. Hartwell owes you a favor. July was complicated. The coffee situation's going to make men irritable, Donovan says. Irritable men make mistakes. Ferrero's staff captain will be watching for mistakes. Then make sure they understand the alternative to irritability. Which is courts-martial, prison, execution if Ferrero decides the evidence supports treason charges. Donovan is quiet for a moment, organizing hardtack crates by date. The oldest rations go to the front of the stack. Basic supply rotation, the kind of mundane task that keeps armies functional when nothing else does. The men trust you, he says finally. They won't talk, but they're going to wonder why the coffee ran out the same week Ferrero shows up. Let them wonder. Wondering doesn't leave evidence. You seal the intelligence summary and add it to the outgoing dispatch case. The document will reach division headquarters by nightfall, then move through administrative channels until it surfaces in exactly the archive location where a thorough inspector would find it. Ferrero's staff captain strikes you as thorough. The mathematics are straightforward. 63 evidence points across 300 men. Each point is a moment where system becomes visible instead of remaining hidden. The waterproof packages, buried. The marker system, looks like abandoned lumber. The artillery schedule, documented as enemy pattern. Donovan's letters, locked in the case under your cot. That leaves 12 minor inconsistencies in the picket rotation logs, where trading nights show slightly reduced forward patrol density. You've been working on explanations for 3 days. Illness, equipment failure, approved tactical variation, routine scheduling conflict. None of it quite explains why patrol density drops on a predictable schedule. What about the patrol logs? Donovan asks. I'm rewriting them. All of them. Just the nights that matter. 14 entries, 3 hours of work. That's falsifying official records. Yes. Donovan stacks the last crate. His hands are steady. And if Ferrero finds the originals? There are no originals. These are the originals. The copies I'm revising were working drafts that never reached final filing status. That works unless someone kept their own count. Who would keep their own count? Donovan doesn't answer. The silence suggests he's already thought of 3 names. You return to the patrol logs. 41 hours until inspection. The numbers need to look like natural variation instead of deliberate pattern. Random gaps instead of scheduled gaps. Chaos instead of control. The former ballroom dancing instructor turned political general will arrive at Petersburg headquarters in less than 2 days. He commanded the USCT division at the crater. He watched his men walk into a death trap because someone at corps level decided frontal assault was preferable to admitting the mine strategy had failed. Ferrero's career didn't recover. This inspection is his recovery. He cannot afford to find nothing. You write faster. The lamp oil burns with a smell that's become invisible through familiarity. 5 months in winter quarters. 5 months building something that works because both sides need it to work. 56 hours ago the timeline felt manageable. Now it feels like trying to hold water in a clenched fist. Sergeant Elias Holt returns at 1600 hours with news from the forward pickets. Our Beaumont of Georgia was visible near the Confederate tree line this morning. He stayed in sight for 3 minutes, which is longer than necessary for routine patrol observation. He knows, Holt says. Can't say how, but he knows the schedule changed. Does it matter if he knows? Matters if his officers start wondering why he was standing in the open for 3 minutes. You set down the pen. Tell our men to maintain normal patrol behavior. No signals. No changes. If Beaumont's officers are watching, they need to see routine. And if his officers are watching because Ferrero already sent word across the line. He didn't. Ferrero wants to find the evidence himself. That's how you rehabilitate a reputation. Holt nods slowly. He trusts the assessment because 5 months of reading Ferrero's command style makes the assessment reliable. The general is predictable in exactly the way that makes him dangerous right now. Coffee ran out, Holt says. I know. Men are asking questions. Let them ask. Questions aren't evidence. The patrol log revisions take 2 hours and 40 minutes. Each entry needs to look like it was written by someone who wasn't thinking about hiding anything. Natural phrasing. Ordinary concerns. Reduced density explained by circumstances that sound boring enough to be true. Donovan brings dinner at 1800 hours. Salt pork and hardtack. No coffee. The meal tastes like every meal since June. You eat without attention, reading the revised patrol logs for the 3rd time. They look clean, Donovan says. Clean isn't the problem, believable is the problem. They're believable. They need to be more than believable, they need to be boring. You cross out 2 sentences that sound too much like justification, and rewrite them as complaints about equipment delays. Complaints are boring. Justification invites scrutiny. The lamp gutters. Donovan refills it without asking. The smell of fresh oil replaces the smell of old oil. Small maintenance. The kind of task that disappears into routine unless someone decides to look closely at what routine is hiding. Ferrero will look closely. That's the entire problem. 39 hours remain. The problem surfaces at dawn. Private Donovan identifies it during routine inspection of the forward supply cache. You've checked 63 evidence points over 5 days. 63 moments where the system becomes visible. Waterproof packages, marker positions, patrol log gaps, artillery patterns, Donovan's correspondence, trading schedules. You missed the tobacco. The cache sits 200 yards behind the forward trench, concealed in a half-collapsed drainage culvert that looks like it's been abandoned since summer. The position is perfect for storing items that need to stay dry, but can't be kept in the main dugouts where officers conduct weekly inspections. Inside the culvert, 4 pouches of Confederate tobacco, Virginia leaf, wrapped in oilcloth, marked with initials that don't match any name on your company roster. Donovan crouches in the culvert entrance, holding 1 pouch up to the morning light. RB, he says. Our Beaumont of Georgia, these came across 2 weeks ago. You kneel beside him. The tobacco is good quality. Better than anything Union Supply provides. The kind of thing men save for difficult nights when coffee runs out and the cold makes thinking hard. Who received them, you ask? Hendricks, Morrison, probably Kowalski, maybe 6 others. They've been sharing them around the forward picket. For 2 weeks. Yes. The arithmetic is immediate and absolute. Ferrero's staff captain will inspect the forward positions first. Standard procedure. Start where the fraternization evidence would be strongest. If he finds men carrying Confederate tobacco, marked with initials that trace directly to a known Confederate sergeant, the investigation expands. Expanded investigations find everything. How many men are carrying this right now, you ask? Can't say for certain. 8, maybe 12. They trade it around during night watch. You stand up, brushing mud off your knees. 34 hours until inspection. 12 men carrying tobacco that proves direct contact with Confederate forces. Each pouch is a separate evidence point. Each evidence point is a thread that leads to the system. Collect it, you say, every pouch. Do it quietly. Tell the men it's contaminated. Contaminated with what? Whatever makes them hand it over without questions. Donovan nods and disappears toward the forward trench. You return to the dugout and pull out the evidence map. 63 points, documented and managed. Now 67. The number keeps growing because the system is large enough that total visibility is impossible. Something always gets missed. That's why Ferrero will find something if he looks hard enough. The question is whether he finds something that matters or something that leads to questions. Tobacco is something that leads to questions. Sergeant Holt arrives at 06:30 with the morning patrol report. You show him the tobacco problem without preamble. Christ, Holt says quietly. Donovan's collecting it now. And then what? Ferrero inspects personal kits. If 12 men suddenly don't have tobacco they've been smoking for 2 weeks, that's a pattern. Then we make sure they have tobacco. Different tobacco. Union issue distributed yesterday as part of normal supply rotation. We don't have union tobacco. It wasn't on yesterday's wagon. Then we get it from another company. Transfer paperwork backdated to yesterday. Distribution logged as routine morale maintenance. Holt considers this. That works if the supply sergeant doesn't mention that no tobacco actually moved yesterday. The supply sergeant is Corporal Mitchell. Mitchell wants this inspection to find nothing exactly as much as we do. Because Mitchell's cousin is in the forward picket. Because Mitchell's cousin is in the forward picket. The lamp flickers. The oil is running low again. Small maintenance failures, accumulating because you've spent 5 days managing catastrophic failure, instead of routine operations. After the inspection, everything will need rebuilding, assuming there is an after. Donovan returns at 07:15 with 9 pouches of Confederate tobacco. That's everything I could find, he says. 3 men are on perimeter patrol. I'll catch them when they rotate back. How did the men react? Believed the contamination story, mostly. Morrison asked why contaminated tobacco smells fine. What did you tell him? That contamination isn't always something you can smell. You seal the 9 pouches in a waterproof case and lock it in the chest under your cot, next to Donovan's correspondence bundle. Evidence that needs to disappear but can't be destroyed yet because destruction creates different problems if anyone notices the absence. The chest is becoming crowded. Holt leaves to arrange the tobacco replacement with Corporal Mitchell. The transaction will appear in yesterday's supply logs as routine distribution, authorized by Captain Webb under morale maintenance protocols. Webb will confirm the authorization if asked because Webb understands what's at stake. Webb lost 11 men at Cold Harbor. Those 11 died because someone at division level ordered an assault everyone knew was suicide. Webb doesn't trust division level anymore. That's why he delivers schedule changes himself instead of sending a runner. You return to the evidence map and add the tobacco points. 67 entries now. The map is becoming hard to read. Too many threads connecting too many moments. The visual representation of 5 months trying to keep 300 men alive in a situation where survival requires breaking the rules that are supposed to keep them alive. Donovan sits in the corner cleaning his rifle. The mechanical action provides something to do while thinking. What if Ferrero's staff captain doesn't inspect personal kits, he asks. He will. That's where physical evidence lives. But what if he doesn't? Then we've solved a problem that didn't need solving. That's the best kind of problem. The rifle cleaning continues, rhythmic and precise. The kind of task that looks like soldiering while actually being meditation. 33 hours, Donovan says. Yes, If we missed the tobacco, what else did we miss? That's the question that makes sleep impossible. The system is too large for complete visibility. Somewhere in 300 men, conducting 5 months of operations, there's another evidence point you haven't found. Another thread that leads to questions that lead to investigations that lead to courts-martial. You check the map again. Waterproof packages, buried and secured. Marker system, looks abandoned. Artillery pattern, documented as enemy incompetence. Patrol logs revised. Correspondence, locked away. Tobacco, being replaced. The gaps are in the places you can't document. The conversations men have during night watch. The glances across no man's land that last 3 seconds too long. The tobacco Beaumont sent across because someone mentioned the Union supply was delayed. You can't manage what you can't see. The morning light is grey and cold. The air smells like mud and coal smoke from the forward cooking fires. Ordinary smells from an ordinary morning in winter quarters. Everything normal except for the inspection scheduled to begin in 33 hours. Ferrero's train reaches City Point tonight at 1800 hours. He'll be at division headquarters by midnight. He'll review the forward picket inspection protocols with his staff captain over breakfast. Then they'll come here. You fold the evidence map and return it to the case. The document is useless now. The real map is in your memory. A mental accounting of every vulnerability point, every gap in the defense. Donovan finishes cleaning his rifle and starts on his pistol. You should sleep, he says. Later. You haven't slept in 36 hours. I'll sleep after the inspection. Or during your court-martial. That too. The joke lands flat. Donovan doesn't smile. The pistol cleaning continues in silence. Holt returns at 0900 with confirmation from Corporal Mitchell. The tobacco replacement is arranged. Union issue tobacco from 2nd Company's surplus, distributed yesterday under morale maintenance authorization, logged and backdated. The 3 men still on perimeter patrol will have their Confederate tobacco collected when they rotate back at noon. Mitchell asked why we're doing this, Holt says. What did you tell him? That contaminated tobacco is a health risk. Did he believe you? No. But he filed the paperwork anyway. The system holds because enough people need it to hold. That's the structural fact Ferrero won't see even if he finds evidence. He'll see fraternization, collaboration, failure of discipline. He won't see 300 men who decided that survival requires ignoring orders written by people who don't live in trenches. You pull out the inspection timeline. Ferrero arrives at midnight tonight. Breakfast meeting at 0700 tomorrow. Forward picket inspection begins at 0830. Duration estimated 4 hours. By 1300 hours tomorrow, you'll know whether 5 months of work survives or collapses. 32 hours and 30 minutes remain. The dugout is cold enough that your breath steams. The lamp provides light but no heat. Outside, men are moving through morning routine. Cooking fires, equipment maintenance, rotation schedules, everything normal, because normal is the only defense left. Donovan sheathes his pistol and starts on his boots. The leather is cracked from 5 months of mud and cold. He works dubbin into the cracks with methodical attention. What happens if we did everything right and Ferrero still finds something, he asks. You don't answer immediately. The question deserves honesty. Then we find out whether 300 men telling the same story is enough to create reasonable doubt. Is it? Ask me tomorrow. 36 hours remain. Colonel Thomas Hartwell arrives at the forward observation post at 0600, which means the situation has changed. Colonels do not inspect forward positions at dawn, unless someone higher has asked questions they cannot answer with paperwork. You stand when he approaches. The frost has made the duckboards slick. Corporal, Hartwell says. His breath clouds in the cold. Walk with me. You follow him along the trench line, past the mortar emplacement where Stevens and Marcus are already awake, past the supply dugout where yesterday's coffee grounds still steam in the frozen air. Hartwell does not speak until you reach the observation ladder, the place where the trench system ends, and no man's land begins. General Ferrero's staff captain arrived last night, Hartwell says. Captain Webb, he brought documentation requirements. You wait. The inspection will include a review of all correspondence entering or leaving the forward positions for the past 30 days. All of it. Personal letters. Supply requisitions, morning reports, anything written down. The cold air suddenly feels colder. Webb is thorough, Hartwell continues. His voice carries the same careful formality it always does, each word selected for a report that has not been written yet, but might be. He has requested that all correspondence be gathered and prepared for his review. Officers will verify that each document has been properly logged, according to standing orders regarding enemy contact and information security. You understand what he is not saying. Donovan's letters home describe the trading system in detail. 3 weeks of observations written in the neat handwriting of a man who still believes newspapers tell the truth about war. How thorough is Webb's review, you ask? Complete. Hartwell looks south across no man's land. He will read every word written by every man in this sector. He will cross-reference supply records with correspondence. He will identify discrepancies. When does he want the documents? Tomorrow morning. 0800. Hartwell's voice does not change. All letters currently waiting for mail call are to be included. Soldiers may be asked to provide copies of letters already sent if Webb deems it necessary for establishing pattern of behavior. The arithmetic is clear. Donovan's letters are evidence. Webb will read them. Ferrero will have documentation proving the system exists. The general is aware, Hartwell says, that soldiers under sustained siege conditions often experience confusion regarding proper protocol, that their observations may reflect misunderstanding rather than actual violations, that education rather than punishment may be the appropriate response to such confusion. You hear what he is offering. A way to frame Donovan's letters as the misunderstanding of a replacement who does not yet comprehend what he is seeing. A narrative that protects the system by sacrificing Donovan's credibility. Webb will interview Donovan personally, Hartwell continues. The private's testimony will be weighed against the testimony of more experienced soldiers. If Donovan's observations contradict the accounts provided by men who have served in these positions since June, Webb will be forced to determine who is providing accurate information. And if Donovan insists his letters are accurate, then Webb will be forced to conclude that either Donovan is correct and this entire sector has been operating in violation of standing orders for 5 months, Hartwell pauses, or that Private Donovan lacks the experience necessary to accurately interpret what he observes, and should be reassigned to a position where his inexperience will not compromise his ability to provide reliable intelligence. The offer is clear. Convince Donovan his observations were wrong, or Donovan gets transferred to a position where his letters will not matter, because he will not survive long enough to write them. How long do I have, you ask? Webb begins interviews at 1400 hours tomorrow. Donovan is scheduled for 1630. Hartwell turns to face you directly. The corporal should use whatever time remains to ensure his men understand what they have and have not observed. He walks back along the trench line without waiting for acknowledgement. You stand at the observation point and look south. Somewhere across no man's land, Beaumont is making similar calculations. The system survives or it does not. Men who depend on it live or die, based on decisions being made right now by officers who will never acknowledge those decisions were made. Donovan is awake when you return to the dugout, writing another letter by lamplight. Ferrero arrives in 32 hours. Webb's interviews begin in 28. You sit across from Donovan in the dugout while he finishes the paragraph he is writing. The lamp between you makes his shadow climb the earthen wall behind him. His handwriting is still careful, still legible. 3 weeks in the trenches have not yet taught him that neatness is a luxury no one can afford. Private, you say. He looks up. The pen stays in his hand. The letters you've been writing home. The ones about the trading. Something changes in his face. Not fear. Recognition. Captain Webb will read every letter written in this sector for the past month. You continue. He arrives tomorrow morning. Your interview is scheduled for 16:30. Donovan sets the pen down slowly. What does he want to know? Everything you wrote. Everything you observed. He'll ask you to verify it. He'll ask you to provide additional detail. Then I'll tell him what I saw. This is the problem with replacements. They still believe truth is a defense. Webb's job is to find evidence of fraternization, you say. He already knows what he's looking for. Your letters will confirm what Ferrero needs to justify the courts-martial he promised Harper's Weekly. You want me to lie. I want you to understand what your honesty will cost. You lean forward. 300 men depend on the trading system staying invisible. If Webb documents it, Ferrero shuts it down. Then the shooting starts again. Then the casualties resume. Then the count begins. Donovan's hands are flat on the table. If the system is that important, why did you let me write about it? Because soldiers have the right to write home. Because censoring personal correspondence is a court-martial offense. Because I believed you understood what you were protecting. I do understand. That's why I wrote about it. People should know. People should not know. Your voice stays level. The moment this becomes public, it becomes political. The moment it becomes political, it ends. Webb doesn't care about the trading. He cares about his report. Ferrero doesn't care about the casualties. He cares about his reputation. You gave them both exactly what they need. The lamp flickers. Donovan's shadow moves on the wall. Colonel Hartwell gave you an option. You continue. You tell Webb you misunderstood what you were seeing. That you're a replacement who doesn't yet know how to interpret trench behavior. That your letters reflect confusion, not fact. Webb files a report stating the allegations cannot be substantiated by reliable witnesses. The investigation closes. The system continues. And if I don't? Then Webb substantiates everything. Ferrero gets his evidence. The system is declared a violation of standing orders. Courts-martial follow. And you get reassigned to a forward position where the casualty rate is high enough that your future letters home won't be a problem. Donovan looks at the letter on the table. 3 pages in his careful handwriting. A description of the tobacco for coffee exchange. Names, dates, details. How many men die if I tell the truth? He asks. You consider lying. You consider saying you don't know, that casualties are impossible to predict, that war makes every calculation uncertain. But Donovan is asking a simple question. He deserves a simple answer. Sergeant Elias Holt did the count after the last time both sides followed standing orders. 4 days, 47 dead, 93 wounded. That was in July when both sides were still fresh. You pause. November is colder, men are weaker, the count will be higher. Donovan picks up the letter, reads it, sets it down again. And if I lie to Webb, I'm responsible for maintaining a system that violates orders. Yes. That makes me complicit. Yes. He sits without speaking for a long time. Outside, someone is hammering. The sound echoes along the trench line. Tell me what to say, Donovan says finally. You spend the next 4 hours teaching a man how to dismantle his own credibility. How to describe confusion instead of observation. How to express doubt instead of certainty. How to make truth sound like error. By midnight, Donovan can recite the revised account without hesitation. He sounds like a replacement who misunderstood everything he saw. He sounds exactly like what Webb needs to hear to file the report Ferrero requires. The original letter stays on the table between you, still unfinished. 24 hours remain. You do not sleep. Sleep is not possible when you can hear Captain Webb walking the trench line 3 sections north, his boots on the duckboards marking time like a metronome. He walked the same pattern for 2 hours after arriving at 0800. Walked it again after the noon meal. He is walking it now at 1800 hours, while the enlisted men eat whatever the supply wagons brought forward. Stevens finds you at the observation post. Webb's been asking about tobacco inventory, Stevens says. Wants to know why our morning reports show lower consumption than other sectors. This is how Webb works. Not with accusations, with discrepancies, with questions that seem administrative until you realize they are not. What did you tell him? That our men prefer coffee, that we trade our tobacco ration with rear echelon units for extra coffee beans, that it's all documented in the supply logs. It is documented. You made sure of that 3 weeks ago when Donovan started writing his letters. Every trade carefully recorded as a transaction with federal supply units, never with Confederate forces. The paperwork is perfect, because paperwork is what protects you when the questions start. Did he ask to see the logs? He's reviewing them now. With Colonel Hartwell. Stevens pauses. He's very thorough. Thorough means Webb has already read Donovan's letters. Thorough means he knows what he is looking for. Thorough means the next 6 hours will determine whether 300 men survive the winter or die, proving a general's reputation. You send Stevens back to his position and return to the dugout where Donovan is waiting. He has not touched his evening ration. The hardtack sits on its tin plate, 3 inches square, the structural integrity of a roof tile. Nobody eats hardtack unless they have to. Nobody has to when coffee is available for trade. Private Donovan, you say, walk me through it one more time. Donovan recites the revised account. His voice stays steady. He does not improvise. He has learnt the most important skill of survival under questioning. Say only what you prepared to say, nothing more. Webb will try to catch you in details, you say. He'll ask the same question 3 different ways. He'll tell you other soldiers have provided different accounts. He'll suggest that honesty now will protect you from charges later. And I hold to the confusion narrative. Yes, you're a replacement. You're still learning trench protocols. You misinterpreted routine logistics as something else. That's all. Donovan nods. He understands the strategy. Whether he can execute it under direct questioning is a separate calculation. Marcus arrives at 1900 hours, with news that Webb has finished reviewing the supply logs, and has moved on to reading personal correspondence. He is reading chronologically. He started with letters from early October. Donovan's letters begin appearing in the sequence around October 20th. You have 3 hours before Webb reaches the relevant documents. The temperature drops as darkness comes. You can see your breath in the dugout. Marcus builds up the small fire we keep for heating coffee, but the cold still seeps through the walls. This far forward, insulation is a luxury that would require materials better used elsewhere. 300 men shiver through November, because the supply wagons carry ammunition, not comfort. At 2200 hours, a runner arrives with a message from Colonel Hartwell. Captain Webb requests the presence of Corporal, your name, at his temporary headquarters at 0600 tomorrow, for preliminary questioning before the formal interviews begin. The request is not a surprise. You are the section corporal. You are responsible for everything that happens in this position. If violations occurred, they occurred under your authority. Donovan looks at you across the dugout. He's starting with you, Donovan says. Yes. What will you tell him? The same thing you will. That our men follow orders, that our supply records are accurate, that any confusion regarding our logistics reflects the complexity of trench warfare, not violations of protocol. Donovan picks up the hardtack from his plate, examines it, sets it down again without eating. We're protecting something that officially doesn't exist by lying about something that everyone knows is true, he says. Yes. That seems like an accurate summary of military service. This is the first time Donovan has made a joke since Webb arrived. You do not smile, but you note the moment. Men who can still find absurdity in their circumstances are men who might survive their circumstances. Outside, the hammering has stopped. The trench line is quiet, except for the regular sounds of sentries changing position, of men checking equipment, of 300 soldiers preparing for a night that feels longer than most, because tomorrow determines whether any of them see spring. You extinguish the lamp at midnight. In darkness you can hear the breathing of the 3 men who share this dugout: Stevens, Marcus, Donovan, all of them awake. All of them counting the hours until Webb begins asking questions that have only one safe answer and 1,000 ways to give the wrong one. Major General Edward Ferrero rides into Petersburg headquarters at 2300 hours on the 16th, 18 hours ahead of his announced schedule. You learn this from Captain Webb, who delivers the news in person. The dugout lamp casts his shadow against the frozen earth wall. He speaks without preamble. General Ferrero arrived early. He's quartered at division. Inspection begins at dawn tomorrow instead of the 17th. The mathematics shift. What was 18 hours of remaining preparation becomes 6. Understood, you say. Webb studies you. The general brought a staff captain, man named Delaney. His only assignment is documentation for courts-martial proceedings. I see. Colonel Hartwell has been summoned to division. He left 20 minutes ago. After Webb leaves, you inventory what remains undone. The evidence points have been cleared. The tobacco cache north of the picket line was redistributed yesterday. Donovan's letters contain nothing actionable now. He burned the drafts that described the trading system and rewrote them to describe routine picket duty. But Beaumont's packages still exist. 6 waterproof wrappings currently cached in the hollow stump southeast of the forward observation post. They were supposed to be destroyed tonight after final distribution. There's no time now. You walk the trench line at midnight. The temperature has dropped below freezing. Frost forms on the earthworks. 300 men sleep in dugouts along this section. They're breathing steady in the darkness. Most don't know Ferrero has arrived early. Most don't know an inspection is coming at all. They'll wake to their usual routines. The Confederate guns firing at 900 hours exactly. The agreed silences during latrine details. The predictable rhythm that has kept casualties near zero for 5 months. Private Donovan is awake when you return. He sits at the dugout table with an unlit lamp and questions he doesn't ask. General's here, you say. I heard the captain. Get some sleep. Will we pass inspection? The question is reasonable. The answer is not simple. We'll find out at dawn, you say. He nods and moves to his bunk. You remain at the table in darkness. The hollow stump is 12 minutes southeast, at a steady walk. The packages could be collected and buried elsewhere before dawn. Or, left in place and denied entirely. Both options carry risk. The choice is which risk you can control. You think of R. Beaumont's handwriting on requisition forms, his warning 2 weeks ago that Confederate officers were asking questions. You think of Sergeant Elias Holt's scheduling system, the precision that made survival predictable. Outside, the night is silent, no artillery, no movement. The agreed stillness that both sides maintain without orders, because orders would make it official, and official means someone would have to stop it. Somewhere north, in division headquarters, Ferrero is reviewing casualty reports. The numbers are too low. That's what brought him here. Not suspicion of coordination, but suspicion of incomplete reporting. He believes someone is hiding deaths to make their command look competent. He's here to find the bodies that must exist. He will find something worse. He will find that the bodies don't exist because the killing stopped. You check your watch. 01:15. The packages remain where they are for now. In 6 hours, Ferrero will begin asking questions. In 7 hours, Confederate artillery will fire at exactly 900 hours like it does every morning. In 8 hours, he will understand what that precision means. The lamp flickers. The oil is low. You don't refill it. The Confederate artillery fires at 0900 exactly. 3 rounds from the earthwork battery, 400 yards south. The shells land in the same impact zone they've used since August. Open ground west of the forward picket line where no Union positions exist. It's so predictable you could set a watch by it. Which is exactly why it's dangerous now. You stand at the forward observation post with Sergeant Elias Holt. Ferrero's inspection party is still at division headquarters, but scouts report they'll move to the forward trenches within the hour. He'll notice the pattern, Holt says. He will. The Confederate guns fire again, same trajectory, same impact zone. Mathematical precision that looks like incompetence to anyone who hasn't spent 5 months learning the difference. Holt makes a note in his duty log. Artillery fire observed, 0900 hours. 3 rounds, no casualties, standard enemy ranging exercise. That's the official language. What it doesn't say, the Confederates fire at exactly 900 hours every morning, because that's when both sides agreed it was safe. Union troops know to be elsewhere. Confederate gunners know not to adjust their aim. It's a performance of hostility that satisfies distant commanders while killing nobody. But documentation for courts-martial doesn't care about context. The packages, you say, still cached. They need to move. Holt closes his logbook. Moving them now means someone will see us doing it. Ferrero's got forward scouts positioned. Leaving them means he might find them during inspection. Neither option is safe. Private Donovan approaches from the communication trench. His rifle is clean, his uniform correct, his expression carefully neutral. He's learned not to ask certain questions out loud. "Corporal," he says, "Captain Webb requests your presence at the command dugout." You exchange a glance with Holt. Webb doesn't request presence, he gives orders. The phrasing means Ferrero is listening. "Acknowledged," you say. The walk to the command dugout takes 8 minutes. You pass soldiers maintaining equipment, filling sandbags, performing the endless maintenance that trench warfare requires. None of them know that their survival depends on arrangements that might be classified as treason by a general who doesn't understand how siege lines actually work. Captain Webb stands outside the dugout entrance. His expression reveals nothing. "General Ferrero wants to interview forward picket personnel," Webb says. "You're first. Keep your answers brief and factual." "Understood." Inside, Major General Edward Ferrero sits at the command table studying a map. He's 51, clean-shaven, his uniform immaculate despite the journey. His staff captain, Delaney, stands behind him with an open notebook. Ferrero doesn't look up immediately. He traces a line on the map with one finger, studying the positions marked there. When he speaks, his voice is measured and entirely certain. "Corporal, how long have you been assigned to this forward picket?" "Since June, sir." 5 months, Ferrero makes a note. "In that time, how many casualties has your section sustained from enemy artillery fire?" The question is a trap. The honest answer reveals everything. 4 wounded, sir, no fatalities." Ferrero looks up. 4 wounded in 5 months of siege warfare, that's remarkable. "Yes, sir." "How do you account for it?" You meet his eyes. "Confederate artillery has been ineffective in this sector, sir." It's true and completely false simultaneously. Delaney writes in his notebook. Ferrero studies you with the expression of a man who has already decided what he's going to find. We'll inspect the forward positions at dawn tomorrow, he says. I want to see this ineffective Confederate artillery for myself. Dawn on November 17th arrives cold and clear. You stand at the forward observation post as Ferrero's inspection party approaches through the communication trench. The General, Captain Delaney, Colonel Thomas Hartwell, Captain Webb. 4 men whose presence will determine whether 300 Union soldiers continue operating under arrangements that have kept them alive. The Confederate earthworks are visible across no man's land. 400 yards of frozen mud, scattered debris, the hollow stump positioned exactly where it's been since July. Ferrero examines the position with methodical attention. He studies the firing steps, the drainage, the sight lines. Delaney records everything. Show me where the Confederate artillery typically impacts, Ferrero says. You point west. Open ground, sir, approximately 200 yards that direction. Always the same location? Yes, sir. Ferrero walks to the parapet and looks south. The Confederate battery is clearly visible. Earthwork embrasures, gun positions, the routine preparations that precede morning fire. He checks his pocket watch. 08:55. Their artillery fires at 900 hours, he says. It's not a question. Typically, sir. Every day? Most days, sir. Ferrero's expression doesn't change, but Delaney's pen moves faster across his notebook. The General turns to Colonel Hartwell. Colonel, in your professional assessment, does this represent effective siege warfare? Hartwell's response is pure military precision. The enemy maintains regular harassing fire, sir. Standard practice for siege operations. Harassing fire that hits the same empty ground every day. The enemy's ranging has been poor, sir. Ferrero looks back across no man's land. His gaze moves slowly, taking in the terrain, the positions, the mathematical precision of everything he's seeing. 08:58. The morning is absolutely silent. No movement from the Confederate lines, no activity from Union positions, both sides waiting for 900 hours exactly. Ferrero sees it, you watch him see it, the unnatural stillness, the coordinated timing, the absence of actual threat. Captain Delaney, he says quietly. Make a note, suspected coordination between opposing forces, evidence, predictable artillery timing, minimal casualties despite extended siege duration, possible communication across lines. Delaney writes. Hartwell's expression remains neutral, but you see the calculation behind it. He's measuring what can be defended versus what must be abandoned. Ferrero checks his watch again. 08:59. I want to see what happens at 900 hours, he says. You wait. Everyone waits. A sound from the south. Not artillery yet, but the creak of gun carriages shifting position. The Confederates are preparing their morning fire. Routine, predictable, damning in its precision. The air smells like frost and old smoke. Somewhere behind you a soldier coughs once, then silence returns. Ferrero's breathing is steady. Delaney's pen hovers over paper. The Confederate guns fire at exactly 900 hours. 3 rounds. The shells arc overhead and impact 200 yards west in open ground. The same pattern they've followed for 5 months. Ferrero watches the smoke clear. When he speaks, his voice carries absolute certainty. Gentlemen, we have a problem. Beaumont's reply arrives at 0400 on the morning of November 16th. The waterproof package sits where Collins left it on your desk, the oiled cloth darker where frost has touched it. You break the seal. Inside, 2 folded pages, Beaumont's handwriting cramped and urgent. Your general is asking questions about artillery patterns. Our officers received similar inquiries 3 days ago. They are comparing firing logs between sectors. Someone in Richmond noticed that certain positions never draw counter-battery fire. The calculation is visible to anyone who looks at the raw data with suspicion instead of relief. You set the first page aside. I have been ordered to submit a report explaining why my section has maintained 0 casualties for 11 consecutive weeks, while positions 500 yards north average 4 dead per week. I cannot explain this honestly without describing arrangements that will result in courts-martial for both of us. I have 48 hours to submit my explanation. After that, my report becomes part of the official record and available to any investigating officer who requests it. The second page contains a list, 12 names. Confederate soldiers who know about the trading schedules, the agreed fire patterns, the system that has kept 300 Union soldiers, and an unknown number of Georgia infantry alive since June. Beaumont has numbered them in order of how likely they are to break under interrogation. Private James Morton is number 1, arrived in August. Writes letters to his sister in Savannah, describing the live and let live arrangements he discovered. His letters pass through military censors, who have not yet understood what they are reading. You recognize the operational problem immediately. Ferrero will not need to discover the system. He will only need to request Morton's letters from the Richmond Censorship Office and compare them to your own firing logs. The correlation will be undeniable. Beaumont's final paragraph is 2 sentences. I cannot protect this after my report is filed. If you have a solution, it must be implemented before dawn on the 17th. 27 hours from now. You fold both pages and place them in your jacket pocket. The weight is insignificant. The implications are not. The frost on the window has advanced 3 inches since midnight. Outside, someone coughs. A wet, rattling sound that carries across the frozen ground. Holt arrives 6 minutes later. You hand him Beaumont's list without preamble. He reads it twice. His expression does not change, but his reading speed slows on the second pass. That is how you know he understands. Morton's letters, Holt says. Yes. They are already in the Confederate Censorship Archive. Yes. Which means they are already available to any investigating officer who knows to request them. Correct. Holt sets the list on the table between you. Ferrero's staff captain will know to request them. You nod. Captain Isaiah Webb arrived at Petersburg headquarters yesterday with orders to compile evidence of unauthorized communication between Union and Confederate forces. Webb's assignment is not to investigate whether such communication exists. His assignment is to document it for courts-martial. The question has already been answered. Webb is merely collecting proof. Ferrero arrives in 68 hours. He will inspect the forward pickets personally. He will question enlisted men directly. The staff captain's orders are explicit. Document every irregularity. Beaumont cannot retract his report, Holt continues. His voice remains level. And Morton cannot unwrite his letters. No. Then the evidence already exists in a form we cannot destroy or deny. The lamp between you gutters. You do not refill it. The darkness feels appropriate. Beaumont is asking for a solution. You say quietly, I do not have one. Holt is silent for 11 seconds. You count them. Neither do I, he says finally. You both sit with that reality. Outside, the pre-dawn wind moves through the trench system. Somewhere north, a sentry coughs. The ordinary sounds of a forward position where 300 men are sleeping without knowing that the system protecting them has just collapsed under its own documentation. Webb will request those letters within 24 hours, Holt says. Ferrero will have them before his inspection begins. Yes. And we will have no plausible explanation for why our firing patterns match the safe zones Morton described. You nod. The arithmetic is clear now, not to you. To anyone who looks. Holt stands. I should wake Donovan. Why? Because if Webb questions him before we do, Donovan will answer honestly. And his answers will confirm everything Morton's letters suggest. You consider this. Donovan's understanding of the system has evolved over 2 weeks from confusion to recognition. He has not participated in any trading. He has not carried any packages. But he has observed enough to recognize patterns, and under direct questioning from an officer specifically tasked with uncovering those patterns, Donovan's testimony will be damning. No, you say, let him sleep. Holt looks at you. We have 27 hours, you continue. Webb will not begin his interrogations until Ferrero's inspection starts. If Donovan is going to be questioned, it will happen at the forward observation post during the General's tour. That gives us today to decide what he knows and what he doesn't. You want to educate him. I want to determine whether education or isolation is the better strategy. Holt's expression suggests he understands the distinction. Educated, Donovan might be able to provide answers that satisfy Webb without confirming the existence of organized trading. Isolated, Donovan can truthfully claim ignorance of details he was never told. Both strategies carry risks. Educated, Donovan might still break under pressure and reveal more than intended. Isolated, Donovan's obvious gaps in knowledge might themselves suggest that information was deliberately withheld from him, which implies consciousness of wrongdoing. Your recommendation, you ask? Holt is quiet for a long moment. I do not know. The honesty is unexpected. Sergeant E.S. Holt has built this system with the precision of a man who ran a Massachusetts schoolroom for 12 years. He knows every trading schedule, every agreed fire pattern, every soldier who has participated in any exchange since June. If Holt does not know how to protect it, the system cannot be protected. You stand. The cold air makes your joints ache. 27 hours until Ferrero's inspection. 27 hours to decide whether 300 men who have survived 5 months of siege warfare, because they were smart enough to stop shooting each other, should now face courts-martial for doing so. Ferrero cannot be corrupted. His career rehabilitation depends on finding exactly what you have built. Harper's Weekly has already named him. Washington is already watching. The lamp dies. Neither of you moves to relight it. Outside, the first grey light of November 16th begins to show above the eastern tree line. You spend the next 4 hours constructing a timeline of every piece of evidence that could document the trading system. Holt works beside you, pulling records from the company logs while you map the physical artifacts that might survive Ferrero's inspection. The list grows longer than you expected. July 3rd. First waterproof package crosses no man's land. Contents, hardtack and tobacco. Your own handwriting on the inventory sheet notes, recovered from neutral ground, with no mention of how it arrived there or where it went after. July 19th. Sergeant Holt implements the first agreed fire schedule. Confederate artillery fires at 0900 hours. Union artillery responds at 1100 hours. Both sides target unoccupied ground. The pattern holds for 6 days before higher command notices and orders more aggressive targeting. Holt adjusts the schedule. The pattern continues in modified form. August 2nd, Private Donovan arrives, brings newspaper clipping about Petersburg fraternization, asks questions you do not answer directly. His letters home begin describing what he observes, without understanding what he is describing. August 14th, Beaumont's first warning note. Richmond is asking questions about casualty rates. Keep the packages smaller, vary the drop points. September 6th, Captain Webb arrives at division headquarters. His official assignment: investigate reports of unauthorized communication. His actual function: build the prosecution case that Washington has already decided to pursue. September 21st. Beaumont's second warning. Confederate censors are now reading outgoing mail with specific attention to descriptions of Union positions and activity patterns. Morton's letters have been flagged but not yet restricted. October 8th. Colonel Thomas Hartwell summons you to his dugout. Does not ask about the trading directly. Instead, your section has maintained remarkable discipline during this siege. I expect that discipline to continue, regardless of what questions visiting officers might ask. The conversation lasts 3 minutes. You understand every word he did not say. October 29th. Morton writes his most detailed letter yet. Describes the unspoken arrangements between the lines. Names no names but provides enough operational detail that anyone reading with understanding would recognize a coordinated system. November 7th. Beaumont's third warning. Richmond has requested his firing logs. He has been ordered to explain his section's casualty rates. November 14th. Ferrero's inspection announced. Arrival time, November 17th at 0300 hours. Inspection of forward positions scheduled for dawn. The former dancing instructor arrives with a staff captain whose only assignment is documenting evidence. Ferrero's humiliation at the crater 4 months ago means he cannot afford to miss what the newspapers claim to see. November 15th. Webb begins collecting evidence. Requests all firing logs from the past 90 days. Requests all casualty reports from the siege period. Requests copies of enlisted correspondence that mentions Petersburg trench operations. November 16th, 400 hours. Beaumont's final message. Morton's letters are in the Confederate archive. Richmond Censorship Office will provide copies to any Union investigating officer who requests them. The documentation trail is complete. You set down your pen. The timeline is not actually a timeline. It is a prosecution case that builds itself. Holt has been reading over your shoulder. Morton's letters, he says quietly. Yes. If Webb requests them from Richmond, he will. Then he will have written documentation of arrangements that our own logs implicitly confirm. You nod. The correlation is undeniable. Morton describes trading schedules that occur on dates when your inventory sheets show materials recovered from neutral ground. Morton describes agreed fire patterns that match the timing in Holt's artillery logs. Morton describes a system that exists in our records as a pattern of coincidences that will stop looking coincidental the moment an investigating officer has Morton's letters in one hand and our logs in the other. How long until Webb makes that request? Holt asks. He may have already made it. Holt absorbs this. Then the evidence already exists in a form we cannot destroy. Correct. And Ferrero will have access to it before his inspection concludes. Probably. The word sits between you. Probably, not certainly. There is a narrow chance that Webb has not yet thought to request Morton's letters. There is a narrower chance that even if he has, the Confederate Censorship Office might delay providing them. But narrow chances are not tactical assets. They are what you hope for after your actual tactical options have all failed. The stove in the corner ticks as the metal cools. Someone outside is splitting wood. The axe strikes come at irregular intervals, the rhythm of a man working tired. Holt reaches across the table and taps the timeline at the August 2nd entry. Donovan. You wait. His letters describe what he observed, Holt continues. But he does not understand what he observed. Under interrogation, he might provide details that confirm the trading without realizing he is doing so. Yes. But if we educate him now, if we explain the system before Webb questions him, then he might provide details that confirm the trading while knowing exactly what he is doing. You see where Holt is going, which makes him complicit. Which makes him guilty, Holt corrects. Right now Donovan is a witness. If we educate him, we make him a participant. Webb will treat those very differently. The logic is sound. A witness might be disciplined for insufficient vigilance. A participant will face court-martial. But an uneducated witness under interrogation might accidentally reveal more than an educated participant who knows which details to emphasize and which to obscure. Your recommendation, you ask again. Holt is quiet. Outside, the morning sounds of the camp beginning to wake, distant voices. The clatter of cook fires starting. The ordinary noises of 300 men who do not know their operational survival depends on what you decide in the next 6 hours. Ferrero will question enlisted men directly. Webb will be taking notes throughout. The former ballroom instructor does not understand trench warfare, but he understands political theater. He will inspect with the assumption that guilt exists and merely requires proper staging to reveal. I do not have one, Holt admits finally. The axe outside stops. The silence that follows is total. Captain Isaiah Webb arrives at your position at 1400 hours, carrying a leather document case that looks too heavy for its size. He sets it on the camp table with a solid thunk that tells you exactly what is inside. Papers. Records. Evidence. Corporal, Webb says. His voice is flat and professional. I need to review your section's firing logs and inventory records for the period June through November. You already have them ready. Holt pulled them this morning and organized them by date. You hand Webb the folder. He does not open it immediately. Instead, he looks at you with the expression of a man who has asked this question 40 times already today, and knows he will ask it 40 more times before sundown. Have you or any soldier under your command engaged in unauthorized communication with enemy forces during the siege period? No, sir. Webb writes this in a small leather notebook. His handwriting is precise and mechanical. Have you observed any soldier under your command engaging in such communication? No, sir. Have you observed any soldier from adjacent positions engaging in such communication? No, sir. Webb continues writing. His questions are scripted. Your answers are scripted. The entire conversation is being performed for the written record that Webb will submit to Ferrero as documentation of his inquiry. Webb's pen moves without pause. The staff captain, whose only job is collecting evidence, works differently than an officer trying to determine truth. He is building a file, not conducting an investigation. Your section has maintained 0 combat casualties for 11 consecutive weeks. Webb continues, still writing. What measures have you implemented to achieve this result? The question is more dangerous than it sounds. Webb is not asking about tactics. He is asking for an explanation that he can compare to explanations from other positions that did not maintain 0 casualties, and then determine whether your explanation describes standard defensive procedures or something else. Aggressive vigilance, sir. Sergeant Holt maintains a rotating watch schedule that ensures constant observation of enemy positions. We identify Confederate firing patterns and adjust our movements accordingly. Webb stops writing. Identify firing patterns. Yes, sir. The enemy artillery fires at predictable intervals. We time our movements to avoid exposure during those intervals. You are saying the Confederate artillery operates on a schedule? Yes, sir. Webb sets down his pen. The silence extends. He is giving you space to elaborate, which is an interrogation technique that works on soldiers who are nervous or guilty or stupid enough to fill silence with unnecessary details. You do not fill the silence. Webb picks up his pen again. And you determined this schedule through observation? Yes, sir. Not through communication with enemy forces? No, sir. Not through any form of arranged coordination? No, sir. Webb makes a notation in his book that you cannot read from your position. Then he opens the document case and removes a sheaf of papers held together with string. These are letters written by Confederate Private James Morton, Webb says. They were provided to me this morning by the Richmond Censorship Office through channels I will not describe. Private Morton's letters contain descriptions of what he calls unspoken arrangements between Union and Confederate positions in this sector. His descriptions include details about trading schedules and agreed fire patterns. His descriptions also include specific dates when these arrangements allegedly occurred. Webb sets Morton's letters on the table beside your firing logs. I am going to compare the dates in these letters to the entries in your records, Webb continues. His voice remains flat. If Private Morton's descriptions correlate with your documented activities, I will require an explanation. You say nothing. Webb opens your firing logs and begins cross-referencing them with Morton's letters. You watch him work. His methodology is systematic. For each date Morton mentions, Webb finds the corresponding entry in your logs. He makes notations in his book. His expression does not change. The sound of his pen on paper fills the dugout. Outside, men are moving ammunition crates. You hear the wood scraping, boots on frozen earth. Ordinary work continuing while Webb builds his case one correlation at a time. After 20 minutes, he stops. Private Morton describes a trading event on July 3rd involving hardtack and tobacco, Webb says. Your inventory records show materials recovered from neutral ground on July 3rd with no explanation of origin. Private Morton describes agreed artillery timing on July 19th. Your firing logs show artillery activity on July 19th that matches the timing Morton describes. Private Morton describes, Sir, you interrupt. Webb looks up. Private Morton is describing his observations of Confederate activities. You say carefully. He may have interpreted those activities as coordination when they were actually coincidence. Our records document materials we found, and timing we observed. We did not coordinate these events, we responded to them. The distinction is precise and meaningless. Webb knows this, you know this. The question is whether the distinction will appear meaningful enough in a written report to create reasonable doubt. Webb closes Morton's letters. I will be interviewing Private Donovan at 1600 hours. I expect him to be available and prepared to answer questions about his observations during his assignment to this section. Yes, sir. Webb stands. He places Morton's letters back in his document case, but leaves your firing logs on the table. General Ferrero will conduct his inspection of forward positions at dawn tomorrow. He will be accompanied by myself and Colonel Hartwell. You will be present to answer any questions the General might have about operational procedures in this sector. Ferrero arrives in 13 hours. The former dancing instructor will walk your lines looking for the fraternization that Harper's Weekly has already reported, and Washington has already decided exists. Webb will have Morton's letters. Ferrero will have your testimony. The correlation will speak for itself. Yes, sir. Webb picks up his document case. The weight of it makes the leather creak. Impressive documentation, Corporal. Your records are the most detailed I have reviewed today. He leaves. The compliment sits in the air behind him like smoke. Holt emerges from the dugout entrance where he has been listening. He has Morton's letters. Yes. And he found the correlations. Yes. And he did not arrest you. You look at Holt. Not yet. The afternoon light is fading. 4 hours until Webb interrogates Donovan. 16 hours until Ferrero's inspection. Somewhere in that narrow window, decisions will be made that determine whether 300 men who survived a siege by being smart enough to stop killing each other will now face courts-martial for doing so. You sit down at the camp table. Holt sits across from you. Neither of you speaks. Outside, the camp continues its ordinary routines. Men cleaning rifles. Men writing letters. Men who do not know that their survival has been documented in such impressive detail that it now constitutes evidence of wrongdoing. The cold air settles. You watch the light change as the sun drops below the western earthworks, casting long shadows across no man's land where the waterproof packages used to cross. 13 hours. Webb's pen moves in your memory, systematic and unhurried, building the file that will end what 5 months of careful silence has protected. The colonel's tent is dim enough that you can see the lamp flame reflected in the ink bottle on his field desk. Hartwell writes without looking up. His pen moves across the report form in lines that do not waver. General Ferrero departed Petersburg headquarters at 0600, he says. Captain Delaney accompanied him. The inspection file remains with Colonel Harrison's staff. You stand at attention. The canvas overhead shifts in wind you cannot feel from inside. The general's conclusions, Hartwell continues, reflect his observations during the forward picket inspection. He found evidence of professional conduct under siege conditions. Discipline maintained. Casualties minimized through tactical positioning and coordinated fire schedules. The pen stops. Hartwell looks up. He noted the absence of unauthorized communication, no evidence of trading arrangements, no indication that standing orders had been violated in any material way. You do not speak. The artillery schedule, Hartwell says, was presented as a tactical adaptation developed by Sergeant Elias Holt, based on observed enemy patterns. The general found it consistent with siege doctrine. Captain Webb's casualty analysis supported that conclusion. Outside, someone is hammering tent stakes into frozen ground. The sound comes in steady intervals. Private Donovan's letters, Hartwell says, described routine siege operations. The general read 3 of them. He found no cause for concern. The lamp flame gutters. Hartwell adjusts the wick without breaking his rhythm. The waterproof case system was explained as a method for protecting written orders during trench rotations, standard procedure for winter operations. The general accepted that explanation. You can hear your own breathing now, slow, controlled. Colonel Harrison has endorsed my report, Hartwell says. It will be forwarded to General Grant's headquarters tomorrow. The matter is closed. He signs the bottom of the page. The ink is still wet when he sets the pen down. Dismissed, Corporal. You salute. Turn. The tent flap closes behind you. The air outside is colder than you expected. Sharp enough to feel in your throat. The sky is clear. No clouds. Stars visible between the bare branches of the trees that line the headquarters compound. Sergeant Holt is waiting by the supply tent. He does not ask. You nod once. He nods back. The system survived. Every schedule, every arrangement, every understanding built across 5 months of careful work. It survived because it was never written down in a way that could be read as evidence. Because the men who maintained it knew when to speak and when to stay silent. Because Colonel Thomas Hartwell wrote a report that told the truth without naming what the truth protected. 300 Union soldiers will wake tomorrow to the same rhythm they've known since June. The artillery will fire at its scheduled times. The trading points will remain where they are. The live and let live arrangements that kept daily casualties at near zero will continue. Because a general from Washington looked at the forward trenches and saw exactly what the official reports told him to see. You walk back toward your section. The picket line is quiet. No unusual activity. The Confederate earthworks are dark shapes against darker ground. Somewhere across no man's land, R. Beaumont of Georgia is probably writing another note. Or sleeping. Or standing watch like you are, maintaining a system that exists only in the space between what orders require and what survival demands. The mathematics held. That is what matters. Morning comes without ceremony. The sun rises over the eastern earthworks at 0630. Light spreads across frozen mud that does not thaw. You stand at the forward observation post. Sergeant Holt is beside you, cleaning his rifle with the same methodical attention he brings to everything. Private Donovan is 20 yards south, checking the condition of the sandbag wall where water damage weakened the lower courses. The Confederate guns fire at 0900 exactly, 3 rounds, harassing fire that lands in the same empty section it has targeted for 5 months. The pattern holds. Corporal Donovan says, he's looking south across no man's land. Permission to ask a question. Granted. The general's inspection, Donovan says, he didn't find anything wrong. Correct. Donovan is quiet for a moment. You can hear him working through it. The newspaper articles he arrived with. The stories about fraternization and treason. The inspection that was supposed to expose what everyone in Washington believed was undermining the siege. But the articles, he says. Harper's Weekly said, the articles, you say, described situations that may exist elsewhere in the siege lines. General Ferrero inspected this sector. He found professional conduct. That's what the report states. Holt does not look up from his rifle. His hands continue their work. Disassemble, clean, reassemble. The motions are automatic after 5 months of repetition. Donovan nods slowly. He returns to the sandbag inspection. You watch him work. He understands more now than he did 2 weeks ago. Not everything. Enough. The wind shifts. From the south. It carries the smell of wood smoke from the Confederate cooking fires. Different wood than what the Union lines burn. You learned to distinguish the smell months ago. Oak versus pine. Small differences that mark the boundary between survival and carelessness. The system survived because it was never explained. Ferrero spent 48 hours in this sector, looking for evidence of collaboration. He questioned enlisted men. He reviewed duty logs. He inspected the forward pickets personally, standing in trenches where the Confederate line was visible 70 yards away. He found professional conduct because that is what the documented evidence showed. The artillery schedules, the casualty reports, the patrol rotations that kept Union soldiers alive without compromising tactical positioning. What he did not find was proof of the arrangements, the waterproof cases, the tobacco for coffee exchanges, the understanding that both sides would fire at scheduled times into empty ground. None of that appeared in writing. None of it could be documented without destroying it. You turn back toward the Confederate line. The stump is still there, 70 yards out, marking ground that belongs to no one and everyone. Tonight, or tomorrow night, or the night after, another waterproof case will make the crossing. Tobacco. Coffee. A note from Beaumont written in his careful script. The war continues. The siege continues. The arrangements that keep 300 men alive continue. Nothing changed, except that now there is an official report documenting that nothing improper is happening. Hartwell understood what needed to be written. Webb understood what needed to be documented. Holt understood what needed to be maintained. And you understood that the difference between treason and survival sometimes comes down to which words appear in an official report, and which ones stay buried in the space between trenches, where the only witnesses are men who depend on silence. The temperature is dropping. You can feel it in the way the wind moves across the earthworks. Winter is settling in. 4 more months of siege, maybe 5. The system will hold that long. It has to. The afternoon settles into routine. Picket rotation at 1400 hours. Supply detail at 1530. The artillery fires again at 1600. Same pattern. Same empty ground. You return to the dugout as light fades. The lamp is already lit. Someone left a fresh pot of coffee on the heating stone. Not real coffee. The substitute made from roasted grain that tastes like charcoal mixed with desperation. You pour a cup anyway. The paperwork from the inspection is filed now. Hartwell's report. Webb's casualty analysis. The duty logs that show nothing unusual, everything documented, everything accurate, everything true, in a way that protects what truth cannot officially acknowledge. You sit on the bench that runs along the dugout's north wall. The wood is worn smooth. 5 months of men sitting in this exact spot, waiting for their watch rotation, writing letters home, playing cards by lamplight. The dugout smells like earth and smoke and unwashed wool. The cup warms your hands. The heat spreads up through your palms into your wrists. Small comfort. Enough. Outside, the temperature continues dropping. You can hear ice forming in the water barrels. The sharp crack as the surface freezes. Winter sounds. Familiar now after weeks of cold that arrived early this year and shows no sign of releasing its hold. Ferrero's inspection is 48 hours behind you now. The general returned to Washington with evidence that discipline is maintained, that tactical adaptations are sound, that the siege lines are functioning exactly as orders require. His report will reach Grant's desk, it will be filed, the matter will close. And tomorrow the work continues, the schedules, the rotations, the quiet maintenance of a system that exists only because it was never named. Holt appears in the entrance. Rotations complete, he says. No incidents. Collins has the next watch. Good. He doesn't leave immediately, just stands there, looking at something you can't see. Or maybe looking at nothing. After a moment he speaks. The system held. Yes. 300 men, Holt says, still alive, still ready, still maintaining operational capacity. He's not asking a question, just stating facts. The way he states everything. Precise, procedural. No emotion visible in the words. Ferrero's inspection achieved its objective, you say. He documented that discipline is maintained. That's what Washington wanted to hear. Holt nods. He understands the layers in that statement. What was documented, what wasn't, what survived because it was never named. He leaves. You finish the terrible coffee. Outside, you can hear the sounds of evening settling over the siege lines. Voices calling across sections. The clatter of mess kits. Somewhere, a harmonica playing a tune you don't recognize. The system survived. The arrangements held. The live and let live understanding that keeps casualties at near zero will continue tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until the siege finally ends, or circumstances change enough that survival requires something different. You blow out the lamp. The darkness is immediate and complete. You can feel the weight of the earthworks above you, the shelter they provide, the warmth held in by canvas and timber and packed soil. Tomorrow the work continues, maintaining the schedules, protecting the quiet, keeping 300 men alive through winter in a war that exists in the space between what orders require and what survival demands. Tonight, you rest. The lamp oil runs out at 3 in the morning, you don't refill it. The darkness is familiar now. Different from the forward observation post-darkness, which was always waiting for movement, always counting seconds between sounds. This darkness belongs to men who have stopped counting hours. Somewhere in the officers' quarters Hartwell is awake, writing the report that will be filed and forgotten. Captain Webb returned to division headquarters 12 hours ago with his leather case. The inspection is over. The system survived because it was never explained. Private Donovan sits on the other side of the dugout. You can hear him breathing. The steady rhythm of someone who has stopped expecting orders to change the situation. We didn't lie to them, he says. You don't answer immediately. The cold air presses through the canvas door covering. We told them what they could verify, you say. That's different from lying. Is it? The question sits between you in the dark, not an accusation. Just a man trying to understand what he participated in. Major General Ferrero inspected the forward picket. You continue. He found soldiers maintaining standard siege positions, artillery firing on schedule, no evidence of unauthorized communication. That's what happened. And the rest of it? The rest of it is 2 armies that have been here for 6 months, learning how to survive in the same 100 yards of frozen mud. Donovan is quiet for a long moment. Sergeant Holt says the system will keep running, he says. Same as before, nothing changes. Nothing that can be documented changes. You can hear him shift position, the scrape of wool against wood. My letters home, he says. The ones I wrote before I understood were the observations of a soldier adjusting to siege conditions, nothing more. The darkness holds that answer. Outside, the Confederate artillery fires at 0900 hours exactly, same as it has for 5 months. The rounds land in the same empty ground. Tomorrow morning, someone will measure the crater diameter and file a report noting continued enemy harassment of forward positions. You think about the waterproof package that crossed the line 3 nights ago. Beaumont's warning about his own officers asking questions. The system adapted. The drop point moved. The schedule shifted. 300 men kept breathing. Colonel Thomas Hartwell signed off on the patrol schedule that made it possible. Major General Ferrero found exactly what his inspection was designed to find: disciplined soldiers maintaining siege operations according to standard procedure. He did not find what the newspapers wanted him to find. The difference between those two things is measured in the space between what you can prove and what you know to be true. Get some sleep, you tell Donovan. He doesn't move. I keep thinking about what would have happened if Webb had found something, he says. One piece of physical evidence. One soldier who answered wrong. He didn't. But if he had, 300 men knew what was at stake. They told the same story because it was the truth, just not all of it. The cold presses closer. You can hear the wind moving through the trench works. Somewhere north, a sentry calls the hour. All quiet. Dawn is 3 hours away when you walk the forward line. The frost has settled thick. Your breath shows in the lantern light. Brief clouds that disappear before you can see them clearly. The system is invisible now, not hidden. Just part of the ordinary rhythm of men who have been here long enough to know which sounds matter and which don't. You stop at the observation post where you stood with Beaumont's note 4 days ago. The stump is still there, exactly where it should be. Disputed ground. Artillery target. Nothing more in any official report. Private Collins is on watch. He nods when you approach but doesn't speak. You stand beside him in the cold, looking south across no man's land at the Confederate earthworks. Somewhere in that darkness, our Beaumont of Georgia is on similar duty, maintaining similar silence. The artillery will fire in 6 hours. Collins will mark the time. The rounds will land where they always land. Someone will file a report. This is the war that continues. The one that exists in daylight, in official records, in the dispatches sent to Washington describing siege operations proceeding according to standard doctrine. The other war, the one that keeps 300 men alive, continues in the space between those reports. In the things that don't need to be written down because everyone already knows them. You think about Hartwell's words yesterday evening. The general accepted that explanation. Not believed it, accepted it. There's a difference. The cold settles deeper. You can feel it in your shoulders now. The weight of wool that has been worn too long, slept in too many nights. The smell of wood smoke drifts from the cooking fires behind the line, faint and distant. The taste of coffee lingers at the back of your throat, hours old now. Collins shifts position, the scrape of boots on frozen duckboards. Sir, he says quietly, about the inspection. It's over. Yes, sir. But I wanted to say, You did your job, that's all. He's quiet for a moment, then, yes, sir. You leave him there, walking back along the trench line in darkness that feels less sharp now, less immediate. The war will be here tomorrow, the system will be here tomorrow. The careful balance of what can be said and what must remain unspoken will be here tomorrow. Tonight, you rest. The dugout is dark when you return. You don't light the lamp. The darkness is enough now, familiar, the kind that doesn't require seeing to know where everything is. Donovan has finally stopped asking questions. You can hear him breathing in sleep, deep and steady. The rhythm of someone who has decided that some things don't need answers. You sit on the wooden bench that has been your chair for 6 months. The cold comes up through the boards, not painful, just present. Outside, the wind moves through the canvas, a whisper that doesn't mean anything. Just air finding the gaps between fabric and earth. You think about the inspection. About Major General Ferrero riding back to division headquarters with his staff captain and his leather case. About Hartwell's report sitting on someone's desk. About the system continuing exactly as it was, invisible in plain sight. The waterproof packages will cross the line again, the artillery will fire on schedule. The trading points will shift when they need to shift. 300 men will continue the work of staying alive in a siege that has no end date and no clear purpose except to hold this ground until someone decides otherwise. Sergeant Elias Holt will walk the morning inspection, Private Donovan will carry the water detail. The unknown number of Confederate soldiers across the line will do the same. The day will unfold in its familiar sequence. You close your eyes. The darkness behind your eyelids is the same as the darkness in the dugout. Somewhere in that sameness, sleep is waiting. Not urgent, just there. The cold settles into your bones, the familiar weight of it. The kind you've carried so long you don't notice it anymore except in moments like this, when everything else is quiet. The smell of damp earth, the distant sound of someone coughing in the next dugout, the pressure of wool against your neck. Tomorrow, the war continues. Tonight, you rest. The cold settles differently after midnight, not sharper, deeper. It finds the seams in your coat where the wool has worn thin, the gap between collar and neck where no amount of adjustment makes a difference. Your breath hangs visible in the air longer than it did at dusk. The picket line is quiet, not the tension quiet of earlier days. Just the ordinary silence of men who have learned that most nights pass without incident. Somewhere to your left, a sentry shifts his weight. The boards creak once. Then, nothing. Above, the stars are exactly where they were 5 months ago, when this began. Same patterns. Same in different light. The dipper has turned with the season, but holds its shape. You have checked it often enough during night watches to know its arc by heart now. Beaumont's last note said the artillery schedules would continue. Standard morning fire. Nothing changes on that side of the line either. The officers who arrived asking questions have returned to wherever officers go when their questions find no useful answers. The system persists because it was never officially acknowledged. What does not exist cannot be dismantled. Private Donovan is asleep in the dugout behind you. His letters home have stopped asking questions about why the Confederate guns miss so consistently. He writes about the cold now, and the coffee when there is coffee, and the rumor that Grant is planning something for spring. Ordinary observations from an ordinary war. Sergeant Elias Holt left 2 hours ago to inspect the southern positions. He will return before dawn. The schedules continue. Someone must maintain them. Your hands are numb inside your gloves. You flex your fingers to keep the blood moving. An old habit from longer watches than this one. The cold does not care whether you are vigilant or resting. It continues regardless. The ground beneath your boots has frozen solid. Each step makes a sound that carries farther than it should. You learn to stand still, to let the earth hold you without fighting it. The weight of your body sinks through boot leather into packed dirt that remembers the shape of 1,000 watches before yours. Across no man's land a Confederate sentry coughs. The sound carries in the still air. Human, immediate, then gone. Perhaps our Beaumont of Georgia, making his own rounds in the reciprocal dark. Your shoulders settle against the earthwork. The wood is cold through your coat, but it holds you upright when your legs forget how. Small mercies that matter more after midnight. The stars turn, the night continues. You remain. Dawn is 3 hours away when someone brews coffee near the headquarters tent. The smell reaches the forward positions before any light shows on the eastern horizon. Bitter and warm and immediate. You do not leave your post to find its source. The smell is enough. It means the camp is waking in its usual sequence. Fires being stoked. Men stirring before the morning cold locks their joints. The same rhythm that has governed this place since June. Behind you, Donovan emerges from the dugout. He does not speak. Just takes his position 20 yards down the line and settles into the practiced stillness of someone who has learned that movement draws attention. The coffee smell fades as the wind shifts south. Now there is only the wood smoke from the Confederate positions, faint, constant. They are awake too. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls once. The sound does not repeat. Your shoulders have found their familiar position against the earthwork behind you. The weight of your rifle rests in the crook of your arm. These are the small negotiations the body makes with long watches. Finding the posture that can be held without thinking. The sky begins its slow change from black to gray, not light yet, just the first suggestion that light exists somewhere beyond the immediate dark. Your breath has slowed to match the pace of the hour, in, out, visible, gone. The body learning what the mind already knows, that survival is often just a matter of breathing steadily until morning. The frost on your rifle barrel catches the first hint of coming dawn, a thin line of silver that was not there an hour ago. You do not touch it. Let it melt in its own time. Holt returns from his inspection. He pauses beside you, says nothing, continues past toward the command dugout. His footsteps fade into the sound of other men waking, moving, beginning the day's ordinary work. The report he carries will note that all positions remain secure. Standard morning deployment. No unusual activity observed. The words that describe what continues. The morning artillery fires at 900 hours exactly. 3 rounds. The same empty ground beyond the left flank where it always lands. The sound rolls across the field and fades into the tree line. You do not flinch. Neither do the men around you. The reports will note Confederate harassing fire, poor ranging, no casualties. The same language that has described this arrangement for 5 months, without ever naming what the arrangement is. The waterproof packages will cross the line again when the schedules allow. Not tonight. Perhaps tomorrow. The timing matters less now than the knowledge that the timing exists. Beaumont's handwriting remains unchanged. Neat, economical. The words of someone who understands that what gets written down must survive inspection. His notes contain only weather observations and confirmation of agreed schedules. Nothing that contradicts the official war. Your rifle leans against the earthwork where you left it, the metal cold enough now to burn skin that touches it without gloves. You have learned not to touch it, small wisdoms that come from repetition. The sun climbs through morning haze. Somewhere behind the lines, Colonel Thomas Hartwell is reading reports that say nothing true about this place. The gap between what is written and what is known grows wider each day, and no one speaks of it. The stars will return tonight in their established patterns. The cold will continue. The sentries will call the hours. Ordinary work in an ordinary siege. Night settles again. The forward positions quiet into their accustomed rhythm. Behind you, voices murmur in the dugout. Not words, just the low sound of men existing in shared space. The cold has weight now, familiar, the kind your body has learned to inhabit rather than resist. Somewhere across the field, a Confederate sentry walks his post. You cannot see him, but you know he is there. The reciprocal awareness that makes this arrangement possible, each side maintaining the agreed distance. Your breath slows, the watch continues. The stars hold their positions, everything in its place. The quiet maintenance of what survives only through mutual agreement, never spoken aloud. The space between official orders and actual practice, where 300 Union soldiers and an unknown number of Confederate soldiers remain sleeping tonight. The arranged silence that continues,